The Monroe Public Schools Board of Education Special Work Session. Today is Monday, February 9th, 2026, and the time is 5:30 PM. Jamie, can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Hack.
Here.
Mr. Jenkins.
Here.
Here.
Mr. Sabatini.
Here.
Here.
Mrs. Vincent.
Here.
Mrs. Williams.
Here.
Will you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. There are 2 cameras in use this evening, one focused on the Board of Education and another that may be used during any public commentary or presentations. By participating in this meeting, you acknowledge that you may be captured on video. Thank you for your understanding and for joining us tonight. Next is discussion items, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Shaw.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. So the first item we have up is our 25-26 budget amendment. And so in your packet, you have the presentation that Cassie's going to go over. Also, in your packet is tomorrow night's board documents, and in there is also, trying to get to it quickly here,
The resolutions.
is also the resolution. So we already gave that to you, so please bring this back with you tomorrow night. We wanted you to have both. So Cassie, the presentation is all yours.
Sure. So I am going to start with some slides that I show every budget amendment with some basic data, and then I will get into some more of the details, and there will be time for questions as we work through. And this is the first budget amendment for this year, which is amending the adopted budget that was adopted at the end of June, effective July 1st, 2025. Our state, after a lengthy time, did land on a $10,050 per pupil foundation allowance, which is an increase from last year of $442 per pupil. And our K-12 general education fall FTE was 4,301.37 FTE, which is a decrease of 47.19 from last year, which is less than what I had originally budgeted, which is favorable. And this is what we pay for retirement for employees on every dollar of wages. It did go down slightly this year from 31.36% last year to 29.91.
But has the number of retirees increased?
That doesn't have any effect on our
Because it comes
financials.
from the state,
Correct.
but we pay.
We pay
I
in,
say that every single time.
we only pay in on active employees. And in fact, if a retiree after their minimum bona fide termination period comes back, we don't have to continue paying in retirement on them.
Thank you.
And then this is an overview of all the funds. The projected use of fund balance in the general fund is 4.2 million, which is a lot, but last year we were projecting 7.2 million, so we are decreasing our expenses. And then food service is in an excess fund balance, so that's why you're seeing us using some of the fund balance, hopefully. And then the rest are using, the sinking fund is using the fund balance that we had built up from the bond projects, which is anticipated, and the bond capital projects is using up the end of those funds. Does anyone have any questions on the summary page? I will get into I will get into details on the general fund of some major increases and decreases on the next couple of slides.
Okay, so I will withhold
that-
questions on general fund. On the food service fund, I mean, we talk about this all the time, about that getting so high. I think you said the state doesn't like it to get that high. I always say the same thing. What else can we do for the kids?
Yes, in the food service fund, the USDA and the state has a maximum fund balance that you're allowed to have because it's considered a nonprofit food service account, which means you're not supposed to be making money.
Right.
However, since the pandemic, the state and federal has increased the reimbursement that we're getting. So we're getting more and we're still giving free meals to all the students. And we're trying, and we have been improving the food options available. And they switched this year from, I forget what last year's menu was, but this year is Bright Kids and it's more scratch cooking in the elementaries versus the prepackaged and pre-made
Where are
food.
they
It's
cooking it at?
at the elementaries.
Oh, we went through the buildings and I remember commenting, where's all the cooking stuff at? So I didn't
It
know.
looks a lot different than in your home kitchen.
Yeah, I just don't recall seeing like stoves and stuff like that, you know? So, what else can we, use this money for the kids? I ask this every time. I always want this money to go back to the
Sure.
kids in some way,
It's-
somehow.
It's limited to
I
what
know that.
the food service can provide.
So are we
they-
maxed out on, whatever we can get from Sodexo for these kids?
As far as, what do you mean maxed out on what we can
I would
get
like
from
to
them?
take this money and make sure that the kids' food choices are quality's better, the food choices are better, that, you know, they walk out of the lunchroom jumping for joy because, you know,
And we've been doing that. They have a wide variety of fresh fruits and vegetables
we
daily.
got a lot of money.
I understand that.
So let's do more, can we?
We are trying. If
So
there's
can
spec-
Sodexo give us something to show how that, you know, this money's being used in some way for the kids? Maybe that
can-
would just be beneficial.
Maybe we should have the food service in here.
Yeah, and could just kind of go over it because I ask this every time for years.
So if you went through if you were to go into an elementary, you're going to see the kids have the choices between fruits and vegetables. They actually get to put them on their tray that they want. So it's not like they're getting served. And so they have the choices of fruits and vegetables, salad, and then Sodexo rotates their menu because they want to keep, you know, so that kids will also eat. And so they recognize like what meals, foods, and so you don't see like pizza on the menu every single day, but you'll see the rotation so that they can also make sure the kids are coming in and eating. It's just one of those things where Sodexo also keeps their costs down as far as staffing goes. And so it's not being chewed up in that manner. So as far as more ways to add more food, I do know that breakfasts, snacks, after school, I mean, we do have a lot going on for kids too, opportunities.
So I like Stacy's idea. Can Sodexo come in and kind of give us a presentation on what we're seeking and looking for?
I can certainly make that request. As the board is aware, Page You left us back
Yeah.
in December, and they are, I believe sometime this month, we may have the new general manager starting, but Mark was supposed to be getting me the specific.
Isn't this
date.
a national organization? So they
it
should have
is.
someone that they can, a representative or someone that they could come in and get,
Right.
we're not looking at, you know, we're looking at high level stuff anyway.
Right, but what I was trying to say is whoever they may have do it may not have necessarily the knowledge of what we've already done. So if you can just give us a little bit of grace to get that information during the transition period here is all that I was trying to ask for.
We got on a schedule to have Mark come in with a new GM and introduce our new person. And Mark have been here before, and he's above the new person, so.
My
Exactly.
question, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
My question was related to, I understand there's a new GM, but Sodexo's a national organization that oversees everything that goes on here anyway. And they should have the historical data and the options for which we would be looking at to choose. That was my suggestion. I am not looking at day-to-day operations and how that they operate their food service because I think that, that's not what we're talking about. That's
you-
my suggestion.
But you sort of are asking for day-to-day information as far as what's being served.
Yeah, just what,
And while
just the
they-
food. That's it. Yep.
And while they are a national organization, every school district operates a little bit differently. So just because they operate in lots of different places does not mean that they will immediately have that information available for what we do or do not do here.
Can we get I'm assuming this is a plan type deal, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. Can we get an idea of the plans? I mean, I'm sure Sodexo can.
As far as the spend down plan or what food's being offered?
What food's being offered and what?
Sure. What I intend to do based on this request is make the request of Mark and provide him what page you had last provided to the board as far as different types of food that we've already upgraded to a higher quality.
And then what else?
And what other additional,
I'm looking at, I understand that, but the last time we got that, we got this chicken sandwich, and now we've upgraded to this chicken sandwich, but we had no clue as to what we were talking about. And so most food service companies have like a menu to choose from, and they have, like Brian said, options. You can choose package C, package B, or package A, and that's what we're looking at. One of those two things have to exist, but to saying we're going from hamburger A to hamburger B kind of didn't tell me anything. I think
Okay.
the chicken sandwich is a big one.
so are you asking for a comparison of what we're offering on our current menus to what other options there could be?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry that took so long to get there.
That's okay. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the
Yeah.
question so I can provide
Yeah.
you the information that you're requesting.
That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay.
It's recorded, and that's why we're gonna pull those questions down.
It works. It works.
Cassie, a question on the 2020 bond
like
debt.
Yes.
You showed that as being negative? and I
No,
guess-
that's a decrease. The ending balance is $221,000. And that would be if we completed the entire
Okay.
manor remodel by June 30th, which is not anticipated to occur. So the ending fund balance is the line above that negative
In the
469.
bond?
Bond fund.
It's the very last column.
No, the
He was talking about
2020
here.
bond debt there in the middle.
Oh,
Yeah, looks like the expenses are less than the revenue,
yes.
yet you still have it as a.
The revenue is above the expenses. The revenue is 3.5 million and the
Yeah.
expenses is 3.4 million.
So shouldn't the
So
line
we're,
below that be black instead of red?
69,000 should be black instead
oh,
of red.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay,
My copy I'm reading off of is black and white, so I apologize.
yeah.
I thought we used, yeah, I thought we used all of those funds, and we even had to go into sinking fund to cover some of the bond expenses. So
The
where's
bond
that?
debt or the bond capital projects? Because Mr. Heck was just asking
Yeah.
about the bond debt, which is separate from the bond
Okay.
capital projects.
Okay.
So the bond debt right there is just our annual payments. If you get down to the last column, that is our current bond
Bond,
project
yeah.
that is going on. So you can see that as of June 30th, as Cassie was alluding to, if everything got paid out right then, that's how much we left. And so, but she budgeted it this way so that we don't have to worry about being under. But no, that a year from now, that would be zero there.
So based on our last conversation, when we were spending the bond funds, the projects that were allocated through this bond were now exceeding the bond funds that were available. Therefore, we were completing the entire bond fund, and that would be completely depleted and going into sinking funds to cover those additional costs. But this shows 221.
Correct, because what you see in the board briefs includes any potential allocations of change orders that may or may not occur.
So this is
So-
essentially zero with what we know, but we can't show it yet
The-
because you don't have it.
Correct. So the Manor addition project this summer is the final project for the bond. And that's why when the board approved, it was funded both from sinking fund and the bond capital projects
Because
fund.
it's exceeding it.
Correct.
So this essentially is zeroed at this point.
Well, but it's
Yes.
not.
Once that
because-
project is completed,
Yes.
it will be, yes.
And so, but remember too, that because you still
I
have.
just don't want people thinking we have 221,000 of bond money left, because we technically don't.
No.
We would not.
This
Okay.
goes through June 30th. Remember, you still have July, August, of September, and November and October of payouts for that Manor project.
That's why I asked if that was going to be
So
continued in
what'll
there.
happen is when she comes with a final budget, you may actually see that instead of it being 221,000, it may be 1.2 million because of what would have been expended out in our current fiscal year, and then what's still remaining beginning July.
So you say that bond capital projects is going to increase?
So,
It's 2 different fiscal years. what
if
that
I
is.
may,
Yeah.
so this budget is only through June 30th. So
Right.
when I go to do the final, I will have a better idea of what progress has been made on that project, and I may decrease the expenses that I have budgeted, because I know already some of the work is going to occur in July, August, and so forth. But at this juncture, I can't determine how much to reduce it by. So I'm allocating the entire amount that we have allocated there.
I'm asking it now because
Sure.
when something comes before us, for us to vote on, it helps to have the answer now, so we know what we're talking about when the time comes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this before I go into some of the details of the
And the
general
sinking
fund?
fund, so we're sitting at 2.7, right?
Correct.
And that doesn't have everything that's already been allocated for that yet.
It has any approved projects, yes.
So if they've been approved, that is
That's
already
that's
coming out of
allocated in the
that.
expenses, yes.
Okay.
So in the general fund, our budget assumptions are the current foundation allowance of $10,050 per student, our blended student fall FTE, which would include general and special education students, which is why this number is different than the slide you saw earlier, is 4,345.52 FTE. As you recall, in June, when you adopted the 25-26 budget, 18 mills were levied against non-personal residency property and 6 mills on commercial personal property. This reflects our current contract obligations, including settled collective bargaining agreements, the retirement rate slate decrease, and the increase in the health insurance hard caps of 2.9%.
Cassie, quick question, because your FTE includes both general ed and special ed.
Yes,
And I know the chart really is just general ed, right?
correct.
So do we know what the actual general ed plus special ed is?
It's that
That's
4,340.
the actual.
That's the actual of
Okay,
both.
that's not
That's
just an
our total,
That's an actual. Okay.
correct.
And all those students are counted in the FTEs.
Correct.
That's what I thought, but then I was like, okay, maybe I'm seeing.
Yes. For the other chart, we've been comparing general education because that's where the majority of our students and funding comes from. But for the assumptions, we include both the special needs and the general education students.
Were the health insurance hard caps insurance driven?
The state determines the hard cap annually based on a CPI index factor. Any other questions on this page before I continue? And this page shows the overall changes of the budget from the original to what I'm proposing for adoption tomorrow. Local sources went up 1.1 million, which the majority of was property tax changes. Our state sources went up 1.2 million, which was mostly some additional grant funding that we had applied for. And then federal sources went up almost 75,000, which all of our federal source income is grant related. And then incoming transfers and other transactions was up $284,000, which most of that is related to the Navarre property field sale and the proceeds from the digital scoreboard loan coming in. So overall, the revenue increased 4.25%. Now, in the bottom portion is the expenditures, which for instruction increased 2.3 million, support services 2.6 million, and other $257,000, which is an overall increase of $5 million and about 7.65% increase.
So you see my question?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you answer it.
So
Maybe for them, we can
Yeah.
state the question.
I have an inkling of what your question is, so you
ahead.
go ahead and ask.
The revenues are decidedly lower than the expenses.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure you guys knew what we were talking about.
Yes, and in part of that, the 31 AA money would have been a decrease in this, which it was offset a little bit by the foundation increase, but the state source revenue would have been $500,000 to $700,000 higher with that, and we already had things coded to 31 AA that we then had to absorb in another manner. Because we couldn't streamline those services that we were already providing.
So we're talking about $4 million difference. So
Correct.
that's 700,000.
Sure.
So, so when we look at moving, like, we can't function like this.
Correct.
Like, this cannot continue.
Correct.
And so, I don't know, I guess I would be looking for answers, like someone's going to come to me and say, hey, I know you're going to ask this question, so here's what we're going to do moving forward to ensure that these safeguards are in place. We talked about reducing expenses, but expenses were up $4 million. So we talked about reducing expenses last April and June. And so we're still sitting here again with 4 million over. So the fact that if we did reduce expenses, I think it was 2 million last year, that means we were over by 6 million and was able to adjust only 2 million of that.
And so if you give Cass a moment just to finish a couple more slides, we're going to dive in a little bit further in.
Okay.
That will help you right here too. There's some perspective that will help, and then, yes, what we're.
Brian, you look like you may have a question. Not that I want to put you on the spot, but I just,
You saw my
we're
furrowed brow.
right across from each other so I can
Furrowed
see.
brow. I was trying to absorb it. I didn't know we were having a meeting tonight until 3:00 this afternoon.
Oh,
so I wasn't
geez.
As prepared as I would like to have been.
okay.
That was my fault. Talk to me again about you said the 31 AA, we absorbed some streamline. My understanding of the 31 AA is that it paid for everything, the grant.
The 31 AA is what we opted out of this year.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking
You're
of
thinking
the-
of 31 single A.
There we go. Yes.
And that
How can I
is,
forget about 31 AA?
the state doesn't like to make it easy. We're in double letters now, so. yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer that?
Yes, it does.
Okay. The next few slides are going to go over some of the major increases and decreases in revenue and expenditures. Anything on the slide that's in a green tint also has a increase in expenditures. Our property taxes went up. We did have an additional CTE incentive dollars that will be able to enhance another program within CTE. It is sorry, I don't know if everyone else saw that Ms. Myers said.
Sorry.
What is that? That is a grant that the state allocates to certain CTE programs that are in a particular list that they determine. And last year, I believe only maybe one or two of our programs, but an additional program this year qualified. So we had an increase in that. And Mrs. Morelli isn't here, but if you'd like further details, I can get that from her. But
In
then,
and out, essentially. It's not a general fund budget that can be used for anything. It's
right, it has to
specifically
support
for
the CTE
so
programs, yes.
It's not really
Yeah.
a
Yep.
major addition to
Correct.
funds being able to use.
Our enrollment stabilization payment did go up slightly, and that's related to our continued enrollment decline. There has not been discussion that I'm aware of, which we haven't seen the budget proposals yet, as far as whether that is going to continue or not. They do have funding to continue this year, but the legislature has to decide if they're going to continue that enrollment stabilization fund
And that's because your enrollment decreases, so they give you.
over a period of time, yes.
If your kids get lower grades and they have problems, you get more funds. If you have more diversity in your groups, you get more funds.
This
What is
is,
that thing that you get?
the enrollment stabilization is only related to enrollment decline.
All the incentive stuff that you get in order to help kids get up. What's those things called? I call them all the time.
So our 31A are risk money.
No, not that.
Are you talking about the title grants?
Yeah, the ones when, I call them special programs that the state comes in and they say you are a special school.
Oh, I
because
believe
you have
that's the regional assistance grant.
I'm sorry.
all right.
I get it wrong every time because I think I call it something different.
Yep. The next few items are all grant-related increases. And then there's the scoreboard loan, which those proceeds are going directly to pay for the new scoreboard and installation. And the sale of Navarre, I only have an additional 175,000 on here because I already included a smaller amount, based on, we weren't sure how things were going to go. So that's why it's not the full amount of the sale.
We ended up in a different conversation.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Because there was the digital scoreboard loan proceeds, we were just clarifying that was a loan. Therefore, that's why it goes in, but the cost of that is going to come out of something else.
So the payments to pay the loan back are coming out of commitments for advertising.
For the
on board.
advertising.
Correct.
Okay.
So this year, it's an in and an out. We've got the loan
Yeah.
proceeds, and then we're paying the company for the digital scoreboard and the installation. And then
Yeah.
when the loan payments come due, we'll have that advertising revenue.
Right. And 35M, that's basically in, out, and done.
Yep, anything green is an in and an out.
Yeah.
And you'll see that on my expenditure increase slide.
And I did hear you say about Navarre Fields.
Yes. Okay. And then these are mostly grant-related decreases. The Fish and Wildlife and City of Monroe grants, so the National Fish and Wildlife Grant, that is work that was completed last year. So the amount that we can request this year for the rest of the project out there at the Knabush Center is decreased. The City of Monroe grant ended at the end of December, so that's decreasing it to what we actually spent.
What was that for again?
That was for one of the social workers. It paid part of her salary at the high school.
The city of Monroe did.
Yes, they
Through a
had a particular grant that was applied for.
And that's done. So we are paying for the employee now.
Correct. The 147G was money that the state had given us to repay employees' retiree healthcare contributions, and that was done at the end of September. The 31AA we already spoke about. 23G and 35J, it's at the tail end of their grant, so that was adjusting it to what we actually carried over, and the same for the Filter First grant. And then there is the reduction of revenue for the removal of the pay to participate fees. Yes, the Filter First is the water filters, yes.
So I thought the original on the pay to participate fees was closer to 100,000, so
It was last year. What I had in the budget for this year was 130,000, so I had to remove that entire amount.
But it was only 100,000.
Yeah, last year's was around 100,000 between middle school and high
we don't
school.
have to calculate anything this year because
Correct.
it's not there.
Correct. And then these are the expenditure increases, which the first ones in green you saw as increases in revenues. The purchase of the 2 buses, which is using the Navarre Field proceeds. We had the UTEC copier lease, the support for the vocal and instrumental music programs that the board approved at the last meeting. We added An agreement was made in June to add a half-time liaison officer from the city of Monroe. We had increases in classroom, special needs LRE assistants and bus assistants, and then additional bus safety monitors. So that pretty much almost all of the routes have a safety monitor as long as everyone is here, just about. And then there was some curriculum purchases and renewals, which most of that, if I flip my page, was our social studies curriculum renewal, our STEMoscopes renewal, and our Quaver music renewals.
Are they on here? Am I not seeing them?
It's the very last item, the curriculum purchases
I see
renewals.
that when, what you're reading off.
That's my notes. I
Okay.
apologize.
Can you say those again?
Our social studies curriculum, STEMoscope science curriculum, and Quaver music curriculum.
Okay. And that's every year? They're annual?
I would have to look at the specific things. Those were, I believe, all one year costs. So that would be a recurring.
Yeah. Okay, the copier and lease, have we done a calculator on if that's a big savings, considering that's the cost of the lease?
Oh, yes, we,
That was a whole,
It was the
we
whole-
we
Thing
spent a
Mr.
lot
Payne
of time
did,
on that
yes.
last year
Yep.
to get
Just
to,
verifying the answer is yes.
yes.
All right. Because we're not the only ones looking at this.
Yep.
The $700,000 increase for classroom, bus assistants, bus safety monitors. I don't even know what to ask. Give me something.
I know we had additional special needs aids needs that we had to add this year based on the students with IEPs. We had classrooms that needed some additional support. And as I alluded to, we are trying to have a safety monitor or a bus assistant on all the routes to assist the drivers.
So these were added positions?
Those were existing positions, but we had an increase in need. We can't control what is documented on a special needs IEP plan. We have to
So
follow
this is all
that.
special needs
It
related?
is not all special
Okay.
needs, but some of it is. Some of the bus
Understand that.
assistants are special needs. All of our special needs routes have to have a bus assistant on them. So some of it is, not all of it.
So the bus assistant and the bus safety monitors are two different things?
Correct. The bus assistants are on payroll. The safety monitors are through us. Or third party. That's why I have them listed separately.
I know, I'm looking at the increase of, expenses, and then when I see that, how does that correlate to the increase in expenses? If they've already been stuff that's already been allocated because they're positions, then was it an actual increase in the budget? I'm trying to come to 4 million, and we're at 700,000, so I'm getting there. All right.
And then most of the decreases are also related to grants. And then we had an LPN that resigned at the prior to the start of the school year that we did not replace. And then I originally had a post-secondary planner at Orchard in the budget, but that he is doing intervention now. And so that was a reduction for Orchard. And that is what I have for my canned presentation. I'm sure there's additional questions. That's a silly.
So let's get into what we, first and foremost, let's start here. That would help draw some clarity. So there's a almost $1.2 million flip this year in our budget, and it has to do with the 31AA money and 31A money. So in order to offset our costs that we already had incurred for 31AA, we're using 31A money to do that. So we had budgeted $441,000, which you can see in there was for the 31AA. That had to be paid because that was already staffed. So that's $882,000. We were expected to get, though, before we had to make our decision, which was the right decision, 707,000, so we're $266,000. So you have a $1.2 million flip of what we would have seen come in that has been reduced. That was already after, so that's the first start. The other thing I wanted to recognize is, yes, we did reduce cost of staff coming into the school year, but the other thing that we're expect that becomes more of a multiplier problem is when, again, we go back to the 24-25 school year, when the state gave us a 0 on the foundation, that every single year does impact us. And so that 0, we were expecting 400 or a $1.6 million increase in our foundation, all right? That 1.6, even when we saw that 30.
You knew that wasn't going to happen.
But what becomes, what I want to help you out with though is if that money would have, that's why we reduce expenditures, but we still though have that shortfall that we would have been expecting to see. And so when we start to look at how we would have been to a balance, more of well, I won't even want to say a balanced budget, we could have been potentially closer so that you would have been, especially having those monies because it's, we were short last year, but then we're just continually short. So it is a factor because, you look at trying to reduce that side of it.
But we took out a loan of $3 million to cover some expenses, so
Yep.
we have 4 million under plus
And then
3
the
million on a loan.
Yep. And so then the last part is that we knew too that going
That-
into, go ahead.
If I may, the state aid note borrowing is not technically a loan. You're borrowing against your state aid for cash flow purposes. So that doesn't increase or decrease the budget because you still receive that revenue.
Still money we owe, so when we pay anything out or decrease what's coming in.
Sure.
We're still 3 million under because we owe it somewhere. Somewhere it's going to come out.
Yep.
Yeah, it has to.
And there's expenses.
I understand that it may be flowing from a different direction, but it's still 3 million that we did not.
But what it is you're receiving that 3 million of your state aid prior to receiving all of your state aid. So it's not an increase in your expenditures except the cost of the interest. So you receive,
That's what I'm saying, but so if
But what
our
I'm s-
expenditures are over by 4 million, okay? And we take off the 1.2 that Andy's talking about, we're still sitting at 2.8, and we had to go somewhere to get $3 million. So you add those two together, that's be generous, 5
But-
million.
but what I'm trying to say is that is money that we are still receiving. So that 3 million that we obtained for cash flow was borrowing against revenue that we're still receiving. It doesn't decrease or increase our revenues or our it doesn't decrease our revenues or increase our expenses because we're borrowing against revenue that we're still going to receive.
It's all a timing.
Right.
So we're advancing, yes.
But
It's a,
So the
again,
only
we're still-
decrease really would be the interest we're paying.
Correct. That's the only increase
Because it's
to
either
the
coming out of my
expenses.
right hand or my left hand.
Correct.
Gotcha.
But we're going to get less state aid money coming in, right?
No.
Because
We still get our state aid in
where's
whole.
it coming from?
So we still receive all of our state aid, but we have to repay the money that we advanced ourselves on the state aid.
That's my point, is we still have to repay that somehow. So if we're 4 million over on expenses and we just have to get 3 million and however it plays out, that was an additional 3 million that we had to go after. I'm looking at,
that was needed for.
But I
cash
think-
purposes.
we can't continue like
The
this.
3 million.
I
if I'm-
get it.
The 3
But-
million, correct me if I'm wrong, the 3 million is a wash.
Yeah.
It's not like we were supposed to get our paycheck yesterday.
Yeah.
We didn't get it,
like a
so we
payday
took out $100 from the bank, and now I gotta pay the $100 back next week when I get my paycheck. Is that the correct thinking?
Right. We needed that right. So because of the cash flow of the district related to our property taxes and when we do and do not receive state aid in the month of September, it causes issues if your fund balance is not high enough to accommodate the expenditures that you have. So you take a state aid anticipation note, which is borrowing against your state aid, but you still receive your state aid in full and you're repaying back what you received in advance of receiving the state aid. So it does not increase,
But it's still a
Your-
payback.
yes, for money that you received before you actually received it.
Right.
So it's more of an advance than a loan is what I was trying to get
I
through.
guess, when I sit here looking at this, and thank you for explanation, and I probably should have understood that 2 seconds before that. But my point is, we can't continue like this. Like, there's no way, and you can look at these numbers and say we can continue in the avenue we're going, because we can't do that
Oh, I'm not
again.
saying that.
No, so when this came out, this is our time to say, what's the plan?
So the plan
Because the
is-
plan has to come up, there has to be a plan.
Yep. And that's why you saw on your workshop in March, I think it's March 10th. I don't have my paper.
I don't have it in front of me.
I'm very confident if someone can look at our
Doesn't matter the
workshops.
date.
It does, because it's early March is better than late March. Okay, we have two different meetings, as
I'll tell you right now. Budget, March 9th.
March 9th. So on March 9th is when we as a group start having those tough conversations about what all areas do we reduce in.
Okay.
And that reduction is, and then right now, for example, I've already, last week, as in our first meeting, we got another one coming up this Thursday, have already stopped all necessary spending. So spending is decreasing. We know too, at the end of the year, that if we zeroed out our lines right now, that past history is you're going to add back into your fund balance $1 to $1.2, $1.3 million. And so, but at that March 9th meeting, is
Okay.
when we start to talk out going, okay, we have to reduce our budget next year by 4, 5 million, whatever that number is. And
Right.
we're going to come with you and say, this is the number we've got to be at. And so
Okay.
we'll go through all those
That's fair enough.
items so that you can,
Okay.
you're
What's
going to have
the-
to make some decisions.
What's the interest that we're paying? No, roughly.
Hold on.
It's fine. Put you on the spot, so.
That's okay. That's a fair question. And I knew there was something that I wanted to look up and I forgot. Sorry, I just have to find it in my folders.
This is where if we had paid advertising for these sessions, that we could actually recoup some revenue. As the commercial goes across right now. Salespeople always like to enhance revenue.
Andy, refresh my memory, because the state took so long to get to where the
Yeah.
first student, did that also contribute
So-
to the cash flow issue?
Well,
Or did we actually
No.
get the money on time?
no, it was more that, that the state taking their time created a concern that would we get the state aid, which
Yeah.
we did. So it didn't, it had no bearing on there. It had to do with just that our cash flow dipped
Yeah.
too far.
Yeah.
And we needed to borrow to make cash flow needs.
Yeah, in the past, that was pretty regular as well.
Yes.
Well,
Yep.
not the last few years, but prior to that.
Yeah, but we had ESSER funds the last
Yep.
few years.
But that's
really
part of our
filled the gap.
November 9th conversation is how to come, what we have to do to come out and then where we need to get to. And,
Fair enough.
yep.
March 9th.
March 9th, I'm sorry, March 9th.
I knew what you meant.
Wow.
That's all right, you're good.
Okay, sorry.
You're good.
March 9th.
And a lot of that discussion is, again, depending on what the state's going to give us, which we don't know.
So I'm honestly recommending right now that we think in terms of getting zero increase from the state and zero increase from the federal government, and we plan accordingly from there.
I'm
That's
with you on that.
conservative, let's do it.
And
Yeah.
just, and we plan,
That's realistic.
and we just plan from that state and anything that comes in, yay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gosh, we're all in agreement.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I've lost a little sleep on this one.
It is a 4.1% interest. And if you give me a moment to do some quick addition,
I think she came. Do you have it for her?
Yep.
4.1 is a pretty good rate right now.
I know you have that. You have everything, Cassie.
I just had to find the closing transcript.
So I'm guessing that your staff's been looking at some ideas to cut costs already?
That's our 10:30 Thursday meeting.
It's just
Oh,
shy
okay.
of $55,000
We've been
in
having
interest.
conversations. Yeah, it's already, is there anything we can do current year? And then what do we have to do for next year?
This is where return on investment conversations come in. Where's the value of where the money's going? So I'm guessing when you present stuff on March 9th, that'll give us options on what is the value of what we're doing right now.
Between that, and then we're also going to talk about different methodologies. And so, for example, and actually, I shouldn't say methodologies, parameters that we need to live inside. So you think about, okay, parameters around class sizes, teachers, okay, that takes care of the first one. Then administrators, and then busing, and then we go right on, walk all the way through. And based on those parameters is extremely helpful, because then we know where we're all in agreement from number of
budgets.
number of social workers per building to this, I mean, all of that stuff. So if we create those parameters, it will be helpful for you. Say, okay, we set these parameters as a group. Now, this is what this looks like.
I thought they were parameters. Because the policy says you
More-
have to create a position before they can be filled.
Yep.
And we haven't created positions. We created one,
But I think the only thing I would also
created the one.
we'll take more time on March 9th, gosh, sorry, that's in my brain, is when I came on, I did hear very clearly we needed to do something because our academics were not where they needed to be,
Yeah, we talked.
and where our student behaviors were not where they needed to be, and so we had to do something aggressive. And so we've gotten very aggressive, and we're seeing changes. But now we're gonna have to temper that down and make that next level of adjustment. Yep.
Fair enough.
You get it, Cass?
The interest, yeah, I, it's just
okay.
shy of
All right.
55,000,
You figured
sorry.
it out already?
No,
She did.
I gave you hand motions?
no, no, I said it, I think there was
stated it.
multiple conversations, yeah.
Sorry.
I thought you did the
all right.
math in your head over there.
Oh, no.
So,
I know, I've always been impressed, but that one really got to us. Good job.
Thank you, Cassie.
all right, Cassie, very well done tonight. So in our next presentation, we have is the SEL PBIS student discipline presentation. So we did put this out to you. We made a couple more adjustments to it today, very minor, but the vast 95, 97% of it was in your hands last week. And so one of the things I'm going to ask is that as Jackie goes through the presentation, she'll show you, for example, like this little page right here, okay? And then once she gets through this section, there'll be another section that has that similar look to it. If you could just, like, right here gets the referrals, if you could just hold questions and let her handle that section, and then we'll address all questions to each section. We did work to make sure to take questions that the Board of Education had from June 10th and from the August 26th board meetings to make sure that we answer them, and we believe we have through today's presentation. And so with that, Jackie, you all set?
I'm all set.
Board, you all set?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
We get the acronyms at a minimum.
We will, actually, we'll explain the acronyms. Thank you for calling that out, sir.
Yes, education is, it absolutely is.
Government, all of that stuff.
Well, good evening. Thank you guys so much for having me up here this evening. It's really nice to see all of you. I am going to attempt to anchor our learning and conversation this evening in the pillars of a strong MTSS system, which stands for a multi-tiered system of support. So I want you to take a look up here and you'll see there are three pillars at the very basic level. There are three pillars to a strong MTSS system. So that is academics, behavior, and attendance. So anything that we do in one area impacts all the other areas, right? The end goal of addressing these three components, though, is always to increase student achievement. So each one is just a lever we can pull to help support with that. So I want us to think about, with that in mind, a student who might be experiencing unmet needs at home. This could be divorce, poverty, abuse, any number of things. That student may begin to communicate unmet needs through. Sorry. Sorry. Is this better? I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry about that, you guys. So an example of the MTSS system in motion might look like a student that's experiencing unmet needs at home. And again, like I said, divorce, poverty, abuse, it could be any number of things. The student may begin to communicate their unmet needs through behavior. We know that behavior is a form of communication. And so that might look like inattentiveness, acting out, work incompletion. So then naturally we see academics begin to decline as well. So by this point, we might notice that the student, because they are beginning to struggle academically, you might see avoidance behaviors, skipping school, feigning headache, feigning stomach ache, wanting to stay home or go home. These are all very common. So by this point, attendance is beginning to decrease as well. So when we think back to relying on our multi-tiered system of support and those three pillars, we would approach a situation like this by behaviorally looking at a tier 2 plan for this student. That might be an incentive chart, sticker chart, homeschool communication plan. When we think about the academic piece, that might be moving that individual student into, say, a reading comprehension intervention and enrichment period, right? Something very specific to whatever area they're struggling academically.
I don't mean to interrupt, but this
Please,
is for
yes.
K through 12.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So it looks,
Just want to make sure that we're all understanding it's K through 12.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Darla. Yes, absolutely. And then when we think about attendance, that might look like conducting a home visit as it coincides with our appropriate attendance interventions, right? So that could look like changes to their transportation plan. That might look like check in, check out to support with positive peer relationships when they're at school. So PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, really mirrors this MTSS system because it is in itself a multi-tiered system of support. And I'm going to get into that later. And I if you guys will bear with me here, I placed some things intentionally to help make more sense of what we're talking about. So I'm going to go into this process a little bit more. But what I want you to just keep in mind is that by utilizing a very targeted, very data-driven system of interventions, we can pull one or more of those levers and we can expect to positively influence all three pillars of student achievement. So what I'm going to move into is one of the first questions that you had. And what I'm going to kindly ask is that if you can hold questions for me, there's a couple points throughout the presentation where I think if you'll allow me to kind of proceed and then we can pause for questions, I think it'll make a little more sense. So the first question was, what percentage of major behaviors are represented by the top referred behaviors? So if you look at, if you look at this slide right here, you'll see when I pulled our top 5 behaviors, and all the data you're going to look at this evening is year to date. That might mean I pulled some of it Tuesday, some of it Wednesday, some of it Thursday, but it is all
This
pulled.
year.
Yes.
And probably within the last week or two.
Yes. Yep.
But
So
it would have included data since the start of the year.
yes, all of it is year to date. It might just vary by, like you said, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So when you look at this visual, you'll see that of the top 5 most referred behaviors, only one of them, so 1 out of 5, is actually classified as a major. And so that accounts for 20% of our top 5 referred behaviors. That particular major, as we refer to that, is aggressive physical contact with an adult. I want us to dig into this a little bit because I know that initially that seems really alarming, and we're gonna get into some data that will help make better sense of that, I think. So before we do that, I want to take a look at this next slide here. Can you hear me? Okay. So in this slide, I lay out for you what those top 5 most referred behaviors are, and you can see where the percentages sit.
I know you told me to wait.
Yes.
But I'm sorry. So the aggressive physical contact is only with an adult. It's not student to student.
For this particular behavior, correct. Yep, and I'll define that for
Because
you
there's a
too.
lot of different ones on here, and that's why I'm like,
Yes, there absolutely are. Where we're going to live tonight, Darla, is going to be mostly in the moderate physical contact and the aggressive physical contact with an adult. And I'm going to
so
explain.
nothing with kids.
No, this is all student behavior. One of them is student to student, which is the moderate physical
Okay.
contact. Yeah, it'll make more sense as I
Thank
go.
you.
But no, thank you for your question. So when you take a look at this, like I said, we're going to live in the moderate physical contact tonight and aggressive physical contact with an adult. So if we can advance. Speaking to moderate physical contact, we're going to take a deeper dive with this behavior. And again, this is not classified as a major. This behavior is defined as a student who engages in intentional physical conduct that does not cause severe harm. We think of this as like tackling during play. When we dive into this moderate physical contact, the pink one, we can see that there's 469 students in the district that have one or more logs for moderate physical contact this year. When you look at the number of referrals, it's 1,007. That's a total number of times that a student was referred for moderate physical contact. Then when you look at the number of occurrences, because remember, the way that our system works is to write a referral, you have to first log a behavior, and then the teacher makes the decision of whether or not to advance that to a referral. The number of total occurrences is 1,205. The percentage of students that account for the total number of occurrences is 10%. Because what we actually have is 469 students out of 4,489 who have engaged in that behavior. So I want to share some data with you that is going to continue to provide some greater insight here too. So if we can look at this next slide, you're going to see that kindergarten is responsible for the largest number of logs for moderate physical contact. But this gets really interesting because when you dig into that number, you're actually going to see that while 26% of our kindergarten students have one or more logs, when we look at the range, so I'm talking about one elementary right here. I'm not going to list all of them for you, but one, for example. The range of those logs is from 1 to 24, okay? So that tells us right there, it's really a smaller handful than we think because we've got one kiddo who is engaged in that behavior 24 times. We've got this other kiddo who's done it one time, but they account for that total number of occurrences. Does that make sense? Okay. So this tells us, like I said, overall, it's a small handful of students. And I want to talk some more about that because, as I mentioned, this is the MTSS pyramid. So the multi-tiered systems of support pyramid that supports that MTSS process. When we look at this pyramid, this really helps us delineate between tiers of instruction and from really least intensive to most intensive. So when we look at the pyramid, it tells us that 80% of students will respond to tier 1 basic instruction around what we're talking about tonight is behaviors, right? But then 15% of students will require more support than that. We refer to that as tier 2 support or tier 2 students. 5% of students will require additional support. And the thing that we keep in mind is that as students move through these tiers, we never take away or how do I want to say, lower the expectations or change the expectations. So whatever we teach them in tier 1, those tier 1 behaviors, we walk quietly in the hall, et cetera, those expectations remain in place, but the number of supports that we provide become more targeted. So when we think about this, right, we know that this gives schools a reference point, really, for anticipating how to support the needs of all students. And I wanna point out, this is a universal model. So these percentages aren't specific to Monroe Public Schools. This is a universal model for how we provide intervention to students. So if we can think back for a minute to that one elementary student that had 24 logs for moderate physical contact, he or she may be a tier 2 or a tier 3, or on a tier 2 or a tier 3 plan. So what that might look like is at the tier 2 level, it could possibly be planned movement breaks throughout the day, ensuring that that we help them avoid becoming overstimulated where they might act out. If it's a tier 3 plan, that might look like the help of a registered behavior technician or an RBT. So you can see how the supports shift in intensity as behaviors shift in intensity and number of occurrences. So if we can take a look at aggressive physical contact with an adult. The way that we define this behavior, which is classified as a major, is causing or attempting to cause physical harm to an adult through force or violence. So when we look deeper at this data, we can see 93 students have a log for one or more instances of aggressive physical contact with an adult. When we look at the referrals, we can see we have 495 referrals for this behavior. The total number of occurrences, so the total number of times that this behavior is logged, is 543. When we dig into that percentage of students that have engaged in this behavior, it is 93 out of 4,489. It's 2%. We are talking about 2% of our students whom are very likely sitting in this 5%, right? Like we can think in that terms that, like I said, as behaviors increase in severity, the supports increase in intensity. So if we dig a little further into that data, again, you can see that our kindergarten students make up for a large portion of logs for aggressive physical contact with an adult. But again, looking at these numbers doesn't entirely tell the whole picture. So when we dig into these, we can see that 8% of our kindergartners engage in this behavior. But again, if we look at another elementary this time, we can see that the range is from 1 to 39. So that's significant, right? Those numbers will drive up that data. But again, we're looking at a really small percentage of students that are actually engaging in this behavior and doing so with that kind of frequency.
Are you going to later on explain, like we're talking about kindergartners that are learning a whole bunch of stuff. So that is the biggest category. You're going to talk about that later on.
I am. I so appreciate you calling that out, Darla. I am. Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. So that's why it becomes really important to understand how districts really support the path to academic achievement by working through that multi-tiered system of support model, where plans really rely on targeting those three interconnected levers, right? So with that in mind, I would like to take a look at some more granular data, but
But before we go any
Yes.
further, because we said in each section,
Yep.
if there was any questions out of that section, we would gladly answer them.
How do you define aggressive physical contact for like a kindergarten student?
yeah. So it's funny you bring that up because I was thinking about that this evening. I have taught kindergarten myself 10 years. And I think about, for me as a kindergarten teacher, various scenarios and what that can look like and how that can really differ. And it really can differ. If we were to go into this further, I would tell you one instance that might come to mind is I have a student whom is likely already on some sort of incentive behavior plan, right? They're already at least a tier 2 student. So I likely have a homeschool communication already going where the student is, attempting to earn X number of smileys or stickers or whatever it is that we've determined. So we're out on the playground and let's say that the student is asked to do something that is a challenge for them that they don't like. I picture that being a student who might slap my coat. No, but the student might also turn around and do the thing, but they have shown a display of aggressive physical contact with an adult. I'm going to log it. I'm going to communicate it with a parent. But at that point, I don't know that I personally am going to escalate that to a referral. So I think that's a great question to ask because it can really look very different by student and by circumstance.
So do the teachers have a set of standards for how to define that?
So I can tell you how we define that I can go back to that slide.
I guess my wife was a kindergarten
Yeah.
teacher for 25 years.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So we define that in some of the literature that we have around logging this behavior as, again, causing or attempting to cause physical harm to an adult through force or violence. It is really, there's always going to be a certain degree of gray area around how the individual perceives it. And especially, like I said, when you're talking about kindergarten students, right? Like it can look very different. And it can look very different across the grade levels, obviously, too.
But
Like,
that really matters to the context of what we're talking
It
about.
absolutely
because
does.
When you're talking about kindergartners, you know, again, this is aggressive.
Yeah.
Physical contact. Like, so when I think of aggressive, I don't see your definition as being aggressive. I mean, again, you know, what is the definition? Because what definitions we use helps us understand what you're saying and we're saying, because my definition of aggression is obviously a lot different than yours, is what Tom was alluding to as well.
Sure, sure.
Hits you in the shin or something like that might be aggressive, but
Right.
just a pat on the,
Yeah, so we have Terry also hop up, because I know this is a part that she also can get to, but
I didn't
it can
see
be, imagine this, that student, you go to instruct a student on stop doing something, and they look at you, and go, no, and you think they're gonna hit you, okay? That's an aggressive or an attempt, and so it's.
No, this says physical contact.
Or attempting to cause.
Attempting, yeah.
Or attempting,
or attempting, okay.
okay, and that's a key right there, is that
Yeah, I was reading.
is that you can have
Okay.
both occurring, or that you don't, you go, and the student's struggling, you're like, all right, it's time, we gotta move, you had your 5 minutes with your iPad, this piece of instruction, so it's time to take your iPad away, and all of a sudden, now it's a hit, that's the aggressive side. And so, are there other examples that we've had occur, Terry, that might be helpful for our board?
I also, if I can share, I think aggressive can also, you need to take into account the context of their body language, their tone of voice, the way that they're looking at you, and then also their physicality of what they do to your body. So like, yes, unfortunately, I was bitten when I was in a classroom. That's aggressive behavior. But also, I have had very young children, young fives, kindergarten students, do what Andy said, but like growling, making fists, and then like gnashing teeth. So like that would be aggressive behavior.
So you said a look or a tone would be considered aggressive behavior. I'm trying.
Together is what you're saying.
It is.
Right,
It's that
because
it-
that's the context. Because if I raise my voice like this, it gets real aggressive really easily, and you can tell the difference between that tone of voice and this tone of voice. Same with.
But you weren't
hand-
aggressive. You just had a loud tone of voice. There was
but
nothing
if I
aggressive
pa-
about
But
it.
if I pair that with body language and I pair that with physical motions in my
I agree
body,
to disagree on this.
that's what aggression can be.
But it's a matter of, it's also a way that we're tracking our students of, are they moving from just being verbal to now going to get physically aggressive? And there is a movement there. Terry?
Sure. So I think just continuing to add to the context of the conversation, students in kindergarten have a lot to learn socially and academically, behaviorally. And we do see more students not attending preschool programs that come into our kindergarten classrooms. So for some of them, this is the first time that they've lived in the same space as 20 other little people. Following rules for 7 hours a day, having to turn their iPad off when they're told to turn their iPad off, having to go to the bathroom when they're told they can go to the bathroom. So there's a lot of social skills that we do teach in kindergarten, all the way back to the early 90s when Donna and I were teaching kindergarten and first grade together. And I think that Andy and Jackie and Mary gave a lot of really great examples of what that looks like. But another part of that, too, is that it's not just tracking data for the sake of tracking data. It's important to note those things for individual students so that we have a record of what their behaviors are. So that if we start seeing patterns in their behavior, we have the data to be able to support that, to then begin to think about how do we provide them with extra help and support. And for some students, it might be, as Jackie had mentioned, it might be an RBT, a registered behavior technician, that provides them extra support, all the way to maybe taking them through the SAT process for some type of special education evaluation. So having that data is really important, and teachers of young children do a really good job of keeping track of that data.
Now, when you log this in, do you have, I guess, some description so that you can identify if their behavior is getting more aggressive or going from verbal to physical?
So I would say that, for one, when teachers log behaviors, there are notes that they can enter where to put notes. But I would also think just about the progression of, like, from a minor to a major, like our system is set up, I think, organically that way.
But by Mary's example, that would be considered a major, so it wouldn't be a minor of
So
an escalation.
this is a major behavior. Aggressive physical contact is a major behavior.
So I'm looking at the report that you gave us, the big packet last year on behavior and data, because I'm trying to use it to follow along with you, so I'm on the same page. And the major behaviors were persistent insubordination was number one in elementary and secondary, creating a disturbance, and as aggressive physical contact was number 3. And so we're looking at this as being number 1 significantly in this year's, because
No.
it's 34% is what you're showing on your pie chart.
So the largest one was moderate physical contact. But what's really important is,
I'm looking at last year's presentation.
okay, but what I am saying, I thought you were referencing that this year. So this year, the largest one is moderate physical contact.
Right.
Yes.
And then the aggressive is what we're focusing on, but last time it was insubordination and creating a disturbance. So those seem to me as being, and they were both listed as majors. But what we're talking about in this is aggressive. So it makes it sound like it's
insubordination-
more than it was last year. And my question would be, what would be the reason for that?
Insubordination is not considered a major behavior. That's under minor, I
Oh, on your
believe.
last year's stuff, it was listed as a
Okay.
major.
I would have to look at that. I don't have it in front of me. But what I,
It was district-wide, elementary, and secondary.
yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't have that information in front of me. But what I am trying to explain with this tonight is that the number is so much smaller than it appears to be. When you dig into the data, we have a very small number of students that are engaging in this, and then we align the supports with that. And the supports at that level is generally directed to a much smaller number of students, if that makes sense. Because when we look at that pyramid, does that make sense?
A lot
Yeah,
of repeat offenders is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Say that again, Tom.
A lot of repeat offenders.
Well, really, when you look at the number of occurrences, it's not a lot, right? Like if we're looking at a student who has one, if we're looking at 8 total students in a building that have any logs for this at all, one student number 1 has 1 log. Student number 8 has 24 just by himself.
Yeah.
So it's not the number of repeat offenders that it might initially look like, if that makes sense.
I think the question about consistency would be important, because if I'm not using a consistent log, so to speak, if I've given too much discretion within that occurrences, then some people might see something one way and another person might see something another way. So although you're saying it's relatively small, and I would agree, it must be relatively small, there still could be an adder to that, let's say
Sure.
plus or minus 2% or plus or minus 3%.
It could change, right? Like I understand entirely what
Because
you're saying.
Yeah, and I understand it's not like you can't make it too carved in stone, but
Yeah.
if it's too wishy-washy, then then you lose something with the data.
Well, and I appreciate where you're going with that. And the challenge does at some point become you can't predict every single individual behavior and have a means to quantify every single individual behavior. We do have like literature that we have provided staff to help with kickboard log entries that defines a lot. It breaks it down pretty beautifully. But you're right, like it's difficult to delineate to that extent.
And the log entries can become one of those clerical tasks that everybody hates to do within whatever they're doing. I have this happen all the time when you hire somebody. Well, I want to be busy selling something. Well, we got to put data in the CRM because we have to know about the customer. So you got to do that. I hate doing that. So I wait till the end of the month to do that. So I'm not questioning whether a teacher would, and my wife's a teacher, so I'm not questioning whether, but logging in Kickboard can also become a hindrance in itself by saying, I've got to go log something now.
So
So maybe sometimes it's easier to overlook one that kind of straddles on the line.
A behavior that straddles on the line, you're saying. I can tell you, I feel confident our teachers don't wait till the end of the month to log behaviors. Truly, I do. Most of our staff has found a way to make that work for themselves, and some folks might do it at the end of the day. But as a general rule, our staff is engaging with it in the way that they've been instructed to do that. But the other thing to think about is I can appreciate what you're saying, certainly with the time that logs take. Logging data is an expectation in any public school district. It is considered best practice to have 4 to 6 weeks worth of data before you really dive into any targeted interventions. And so schools are doing it in some way, shape, or form. Some might be doing it on paper. Some are doing it electronically. And I'll get into a little bit too what Kickboard affords us. But the expectation, Brian, around the documentation is something that is best practice in our profession.
So Jackie, if
Yeah.
you come take this right here, looking at the top, that's the district one. And so what Darla is referring to here is that last year.
There's district, elementary and.
Right, but for purposes, because everything right here is district level, that when we looked at last year, if you could kind of.
Do you want this back?
Well, just, if you could just have Darla re-ask the question about, so what shifted where, now the moderate physical is our number one rather than.
Well, moderate's number one.
Insubordination or.
Aggressive is, the other one's number two. And the other two that were prominent last year in your data is not there, so, yeah.
Insubordination, is that?
Yeah, what's the number?
It fell one.
Yeah, the top line there.
Yeah, so persistent insubordination was 1, creating a disturbance was 2, and aggressive physical contact with an adult was 3.
Yeah. It's certainly
I just was like, we're looking at data and, when we look at last year's data as compared to this data, that's what gives us the most insight into how things are functioning. Are things doing better or not doing better? So when we talk about how are we defining what is considered aggressive or moderate aggressive behavior, and if it's looking as that increased, is that a definition thing that changed? And based on this conversation, it's not clear enough to be able to discern that. The other thing is based on what Tom and Brian both said and is alluded to is that people's perceptions of what is considered or how they want to spend their time can definitely impact these numbers. And so in this case, is there a data point that I don't want anybody's name that says David logs 100 and Terry does 10?
You're asking me if that information can be pulled by teacher?
I'm just saying because when we're looking at the differences of the definitions and we're looking at the ambiguity in what is considered this compared to even Mary's example, like, when we're breaking down data, like that could be a point because like he said, if Terry says like, I don't want to log all that, I'm good with where I'm at. And David's like, I'm going to make sure I capture them all so we have the best data. Like, and his definition is different than hers.
So
The ambiguity across levels, I'm wondering the impact.
But
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but
you're
there
good.
could also be other reasons behind that. teacher A could be a first-year teacher and doesn't have the classroom management strategies that teacher B does because they've been in the classroom for 10 years and they have solid classroom management skills. So teacher A might have more referrals. There
So,
also might
made
be
my point.
there also might be different levels of behaviors represented in their student populations as well. So they might have a totally different pool of students from day to day. This is especially true at the elementary level when they have a self-contained classroom, right? So the group of students in classroom A might have wildly different behavior patterns than what would be in classroom B. And that might have nothing to do with level of teacher experience or anything like that. That's just the variables of human beings.
So if I can share something, so to answer your question, we can pull it by individual teacher. Kickboard provides that capacity
And maybe
to do
the
that.
clarity on the the parameters. I don't know if that's even possible.
The standards.
The standards. Yeah.
So as I said, we do have a document that has been shared out with teachers that is a booklet that goes
It's
through
probably in
every.
the packet you gave me.
The booklet is not in the packet that I gave you. No.
I'll take my booklet back.
Sorry. Here you are.
Only because I'm probably going to find more reference stuff.
The other thing that I would share here is that we look at data. You're looking at data this evening as a whole, like year to date this school year, 30,000 foot view. When we do the work of PBIS committees, that's at the building level. So we will look across the building at what our hotspots are, what our top behaviors are. But then we also have data studies. That is a practice that is in place within our district. And so at that time, teachers often will look at their own individual data as well.
Much as what we asked for with student data, with a curriculum committee idea or something like that, getting us involved maybe getting involved in some of these PBIS meetings would help us see what granular data looks like. Once
So-
again, you're in the weeds. We're not in the weeds.
Yeah.
It might be beneficial for me to spend the day in the weeds so I know what's happening.
I'm going
We
to
used
walk
to
you
have
through the
committees.
weeds here in just a minute.
Okay, all right.
But we did. We used to have committees.
Yeah.
We had policy committees, we had curriculum committees, we had finance committees, we had all those kind
Just
of
an idea,
committees.
possibility like you
Yeah.
talked
He's
about.
referring to the
Yeah.
going to the buildings and
Yeah.
and take part of those.
Yeah. so
Wit-
the building
witnessing
policy,
it.
I don't want to create, I'm not going back to that, I don't want necessarily about the committee model, but I do like the idea of possibly sitting in on one of those.
What that work
witnessing it.
looks like. Yeah, and I would love to share some of that work with you this evening, actually.
Probably will wanna weigh in with it.
Well, it's great because we have not, I don't think, shared this particular layout for you. So I'm glad that you asked, and I'm really excited to
I
walk you
just think the
through
whole
that.
kindergarten thing just kind of caught us completely off guard. And because everything else is almost nothing and it's all kindergarten and it's like, where do you get the definition of
We're
that?
going to talk more about
So
that.
one other thing, and I just want to put this out there, is if we can just do this, just for the thrill of it. Jamie, how many kids in your family do you have?
I have 8 children.
Thank you. Cindy? 2. David?
2,
Brian?
1.
1.
5.
5.
2.
2.
2.
2. 1.
1.
3.
Biological or
Include them all.
Just include them.
kids that
Yeah.
live at my house? Like, what are
Yeah, there we go.
What was your number?
2 that I gave birth to?
Okay. 3, 4, 3. Reason I was going there is there's a lot more ones today
Yeah.
than there are, and so when we look at kindergarten, that may be their first experience, and so we're seeing, and our teachers, as Jackie was saying, they're logging because if behaviors start to increase, then we have to address that, and we have to see those patterns.
Yep,
Otherwise, services are hard because you can't just go and say, well, hey, Andy's doing this today, and we need to do this for him, and we need to see a pattern. And so, but I would also say to you, once we start teaching kindergartners, what do we start to see? And those expectations shift. And so,
And that is true in really any public school district, that the expectation is that you are tracking that data and you can provide the 4 to 6 weeks and identify the patterns. So, okay. So if we
Now, the
can.
next set of slides are really good. Yeah, next set of slides are very
Okay,
intriguing.
okay. So if we can look at some more granular data, I'm going to share with you a few slides here that will do that. It'll still be from the district overview, but if we look at this one
And
here,
we're still only talking about aggressive behavior.
no, ma'am,
Now
we
we're
are.
talking about all of it.
We are talking about referrals,
Referrals.
just referrals. Yep, which these are the behaviors that have made it to the desk of our administrators and require administrative intervention. So if we can look at this slide, we can see that the numbers appear to be highest during and after the lunch hour. So we can surmise that it may be attributed to less structured time of the day, right? We know that there's a great deal more of socializing that happens and just an overall less structured point of the school day. We can also assume that there's likely the restlessness that leads up to lunch. And then there's that transition of trying to, settle ourselves back in after
Angry is a
lunch.
real thing, I hear.
Yes, I know that well. But then there's also coming in from afternoon recess too, which is something we need to think about as well, because that tells us a little bit about what transitions might need support, the transitions within the day.
Does that include what goes on at recess? Kids
So-
are all out playing football.
Yes.
They tackle each other.
Yes,
And they
time of day,
and you
like
consider that a major.
It's a referral.
we're looking at referrals.
I'm just throwing a scenario out there.
We're looking at referrals.
So it does include recess.
Yeah, the time of, yes, this is, if you
Because
look.
this would be lunch and recess during this time, mostly,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Lunch, recess, and the transition times leading up
That's why I
to
asked.
and after. That is correct. So when we think about the PBIS model and what this could look like when we do this work at the building level, if this is what, for example, our building level data looked like, we might sit around the table and say, okay, like we want to address behaviors in the cafeteria. We might, and that might look like providing some tools and resources for our lunchroom paras and support. That might even look like, oh, maybe we notice as a building that hallway behavior is a concern too. And maybe we feel that, again, those transition times, right, in the hallway leading up to those periods, coming out of those periods. So maybe we layer that with a goal around hallway behavior as well. That might look like reteaching Tier 1 expectations to all students in all classrooms, right? Then also looking at our top 10, 12, 5 that are struggling most with those behaviors. And then, as I said, that's your Tier 2 students in that situation, and you're going to provide a little extra support with them. So really, these are just some examples, but the process remains the same, which is that our decisions are rooted in data. So if we take a look at the next slide, we can look at referrals by days of the week. So this slide, we know that our half days occur on Wednesdays. So that is likely impacting this data, right? We know there's a lot of factors that can influence it, but I think it is fair to say that the reduction in the overall numbers spent in the building are going to naturally impact the days of the week. And that might look different, last year and next year. But so then if we look at referrals by location, we can see here that our classrooms account for most referrals by location. By default, we can obviously safely assume that students spend the bulk of the day in their classrooms. So to a certain extent, that's going to contribute to that because that's where they spend the bulk of their time. But again, this is a situation where as a building, we might look at this too and say, you know what though? Hallway is next on that list. And again, we may set some expectations and some goals around hallway behavior. So again, that might be our Tier 1 instruction. And then looking at who our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students might be and what supports we can put into place, additional supports, how we can adjust the supports. So that's kind of how that is approached through the PBIS process. And we're going to talk more about that too. So if you...
Did the referrals, I'm looking at last year's data, the referrals decrease, increase compared to last year?
So I can't answer that for you tonight, Darla, because
I
this
got-
is not year-to-date data. So when I would have last presented to you, I believe you had a full year's worth of data.
It was
So I'm going to,
September to May.
yeah. So what I'm giving you tonight is year-to-date. And we're going to talk about some trends here, but like I said, this is not a year-end presentation where I can really give you the apples to apples. I'm excited to do that. I can tell you, I'm definitely excited to do that, but that's just not where we're at this point in the year.
Jack, if I could ask
Yeah.
one question
Yeah.
on this one.
Yeah.
Since I know we have mixed classes, does kindergarten also include some young fives?
So yes, 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 yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So when you look at this data here, this slide is really.
5-year-old.
This slide is really important because you can see there's an overall decrease across the grades. This happens because of clear, consistent instruction and targeted interventions over the years, right? We are looking at not even one full school year's data, but you see that there are lower numbers of referrals at the higher grades, and that can be a result of the cumulative effect of this targeted intervention and instruction.
Or
over
the
time.
maturity level of the child, that, because if you're
Well-
talking young fives and kindergartners, their
Yeah.
maturity level and their understanding of what's acceptable, non-acceptable varies from an 11th and 12th grader who understands consequences.
It does.
I'm not saying that
Darla.
the data, I'm not saying
Sure.
what you're doing isn't helping. What
Sure.
I'm saying is there
Yeah.
is also an element of getting older and thank you.
Well, here's what I would say to that. There is, of course, right? Of course, maturity is always an element of that as well. But if we did nothing, if we took these supports away, if we took this program away, if we took these structures away, the trend that you're going to see could very well flip. Right, because that is not, like, children don't learn just by sitting in that environment. They learn by direct instruction and cumulative instruction and targeted interventions. So that's what allows us over a child's academic career to have that sort of impact.
So how long, I know I looked at the paperwork that I think, I'm going to throw out a number because, and you can tell me if I'm right or not, when I went through the paperwork today, a portion of this was started about 10 years ago.
Do you mean nationally?
No, Monroe. And then PBIS, SEL started really pulling in the data and stuff when these programs came out. Am I missing something there?
So
Oh, sorry.
you're okay.
No, that's, you have to push back, because this group of people will continue to ask. Jackie,
Well,
you push it
when we
back.
say that these trends are reflective.
No, I agree with you, but I'm
yeah.
saying, let's let her.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so it's important to note that without a data warehouse such as Kickboard, it would be much more difficult to obtain visuals and to get down to such a granular level. And I'm going to circle back a little bit about districts and use of Kickboard as well. But all of this is to say that the trend here is ultimately what we would really hope to see. And I'm going to show you another slide as well that supports some of this too. So if you take a look at this slide, this is another example of ongoing data points that we are monitoring as a district. And we pull this monthly. This visual represents the bird's eye view of how our district is performing month over month with that snapshot up in the corner of a year-to-year comparison. So you can see that as the board has requested, the number of school days are on here as well. We know that obviously that has an impact, right? If you are in school less days, that's going to impact number of referrals to a certain extent. We know that. But when you look at our suspension numbers, you see that there's a bump in October, but the overall trend continues to decrease. Something that's, again, important to mention here is when you think about referrals and suspensions and you think about that bump that you see, I want to go back to that 4 to 6 weeks of data that we start collecting immediately. And it's immediate. But you need the 4 to 6 weeks to get to know the student, to identify what the behavior patterns are. So it's not uncommon that you see that adjustment period and that data tracking period where you see a bump like that in October. But the downward trend that we see is obviously what we would very much expect to see with the targeted instruction and interventions. With regard to expulsions, you can see that that has decreased overall so far quite beautifully. We were sitting at 19 last year. At this point, we are into February, and we're trending very, very well with that. When you look at the chronically attendance box over here, I'm sorry, chronically absent box, we know that attendance is an important pillar of that multi-tiered systems of support model. We know that, and we know that that is a focal point for us as a district, as much as it is a focal point, unfortunately, across the state and the country. Post-COVID, schools have had a really hard time overall rebounding their attendance numbers.
So, Jackie, if you take
Yep.
one moment and, chronically absent is greater than 10 days, correct?
Yeah.
No,
It's 10
10%. Okay. It's constantly moving. Thank you.
But these numbers aren't fluctuating by more than 6%. So that would be more of a constant than an overall fluctuation. So it's maintaining about a 35% of our student population. This is the entire district, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going back to our attendance conversations, and I don't recall those numbers correlating to that extent.
That's different than truancy.
We understand that. That's why we ask the definition before we ask a question.
So on this document here, something that is interesting when Jackie and I were working on going through the presentation earlier today, if you look at January for referrals and suspensions, what's really unique here is January is a month where we did not have a lot of school occur, but what we also didn't have was a lot of consistency. And so I would have expected that those two areas would have been higher simply due to out of routine. You know, you think about it. So trying to get kids back into a routine. And I remember I was talking with Steve at the high school, and point is like, we got to get back into a routine, you know? And so it's just an interesting talking point when we were looking at like, wow, I would have thought the data would have saw a greater number, but it didn't happen, which was kind of,
I would have thought
Really impressive.
September would have been higher than October, but, you know,
Well,
You have to take 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
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 That's why it's counterintuitive because the data has.
That's why October starts so high.
Honeymoon phase.
I was
Yep.
just gonna say, that's really big too. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
So now we're at another pausing spot.
Yep.
I think there was a question that we needed to get an answer to. Darla, you had one right there,
Just now?
where Brian said, okay, keep going.
Oh, no, don't say Brian said that.
I don't.
No.
It was,
You were asking a question around PBIS and when it launched. I know that my
Oh,
prior
yeah.
district, when I was an elementary principal, was around the 2003-04 time period when PBIS got going. At least, and it started even just a little prior to that. And so for
Well-
Monroe Public, though, I don't know the exact date when PBIS came into our school district here.
I was just going back to look because those numbers matter. And so I was like, okay, how long has this been going on? Like, what can we expect to look at I'm always looking for rate of return on this because of the longevity of it. And somewhere, it's probably in one of these packets I got. I mean, I got a few of them here that I saw that, but maybe it wasn't completely accurate. But I'm saying that this data,
was.
that-
Break it up a little bit.
I can help. So, PBIS and SEL have been in use in Monroe Public Schools since I've been here. However, we haven't had a centralized database like what you were sharing earlier, a warehouse, if you will, to store all the data in one spot. We used to have one thing called Swiss, where we had to do behavior type things, and then we had another thing called the PMT that we had academic but also behavior type things, and we had to log them separately because they didn't transfer over because they were two totally different systems. And then we had Power School, which was for like grades. So those three systems didn't talk to each other, so it was totally inefficient, that's a word that I would use. But the practice of doing PBIS, the practice of doing multi-tiered systems of support has been in Monroe Public Schools before my existence. So I can share that with confidence.
PBIS has been on the educational scene for quite a while. It was actually the Bush administration that introduced it with the reauthorization of IDEA.
It's not like it's, I know when we did some data points a while back, when you gave numbers of the amount of schools in the nation that are doing it, it turned out to be like 1%.
No, that's,
Because there were 95,000 public schools, and you said 1,000 of them were using PBIS and SEL. That was your data you gave me. I just went with what you gave me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Not
so
Kickboard, but
so-
they are
Yeah.
using PBIS, they are using.
1,000 out of the 95,000.
No, ma'am. Kickboard.
Yeah, that was,
Data housing system.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I do think that my comment was misleading, and I know exactly the comment that you're talking about. Without a doubt, 90 to 100% of public schools do PBIS and insert social emotional learning into their curriculum at some point.
and I can speak to that, Darla, as if we.
I'm not, I would seriously have to see some data on that. I don't need it, but when we're looking at the context of success and the usage of it, yeah.
AI overview will give you that. I think AI overview gives you that.
And I have some information too that I can
That
provide
we
you a
can do
little bit
that,
more
yeah.
locally.
But it was based on that conversation. The other thing was attendance, and I think it's interesting that there were how many, that we missed a few days in January of school. That's not included in here. So out of the total 14 instruction days, we were still at 35% attendance.
What is not included, Darla? The days that we.
Yeah.
So 14 is the days that we
The
were-
only amount of days that there was instruction
Correct.
was 14.
Correct, yes.
But the percentage of absences was still 35%. So you would think, in 14 days of instruction out of an entire month, you would have a lower
Yeah.
absentee rate instead of being higher.
You would hope, but you have parents like, oh, so I don't know the days that we missed, but if it was attached near a weekend, they're not here. If it was where, something, I don't believe that superintendent had us go to school today, my child's not going to school today. So, and I know we do have those.
I know for sure at least there was a Monday and a Tuesday.
And it's attendance truly, like, we understand that that's a focal point and and that is not to be dismissive of that, but it is a focal point in many districts. Attendance Works is a large organization that supports informing policy and stuff like that around student attendance. Something they worked on, I believe, last school year was just refining how sick is too sick to come to school. And so the approach for attendance is really addressing barriers, which is like your housing insecurity, aversions such as struggling academically, disengagement when we have no meaningful relationships, and then the misconceptions around attendance protocol, which that can look like, attendance only matters at the higher grades, or attendance is only a problem if it's not.
It's just an interesting
excused.
data point when we're talking about all of this, so.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. So if we are
Yeah.
good, I'll
Move on.
proceed. So we wanted to share with you some 5th and 6th grade trend data here. So if we take a look at this data here, we know that one of our most critical behavior measures for our 5th and 6th grade students is looking at those days of suspension. So if you take a look at 5th and 6th graders from 2024 and 2025, you can see that in 5th grade, there were 395 days of suspension because 90 out of 319 students, 28.1%, were suspended at least once. When you look at 6th grade of 2024-25, there were 438 days of suspension with 84 students accounting for that, 29%. When you look at this year's data, our 5th grade students are sitting at 167 days thus far, because again, this is year-to-date data. And then our 6th grade is sitting at 91 days. Where this also gets really interesting is if we choose to look at the side of it being a cohort. So if we look at the 5th graders last year having 90 out of 319 students suspended, and you look at the 6th graders this year, only 51 students have been suspended. So that number dropped. And again, this is not apples to apples because we don't have year-to-date data to give you. But at this point in the year, we can say that last year's 5th graders there were 28% of students that received a suspension, and this year we're looking at 16% for that same cohort.
And considering we're over halfway through the year, that number is.
It's inspiring. Yeah, it is. It really is.
Trend.
Do we suspect that maybe, obviously I'm asking out of ignorance,
Please.
since we went to the 5-6 plan, that this has been beneficial as far as that? You know?
So one of the beauties about that plan is that, and I can speak to this having been at the middle school for 2 years in different capacities, but that is such a short period to form peer relationships. And I know, Brian, you had said something that I notated that I thought was just really, it was really well said several weeks ago about it's really more about workers staying not because you pay them, but because they have 3 to 5 good friends. And that peer-to-peer bonding is probably the biggest thing that can happen. Thank you for calling that out, because that's part of what we're targeting with that reconfiguration, is giving those students that opportunity to be together and to form relationships before they ever make it to the middle school. So yes, the hope is that that is helping facilitate increased connectedness and relationship building to positively impact that number.
And I think to speak to that, Stacy and I are the same age. We had the 7th grade building. Cantrick was only 7th grade. So
Okay.
once again, it did give us the opportunity coming out of elementary in our own little cocoon, meshing everybody together and adding that year before we got to middle school. I think that was very, very beneficial. And I
Yeah.
think that our academics excelled because of that at that particular time. So, yeah.
Relationships they're everything. They matter. They make a big difference. So thank you for asking that, Gary. So this is also very exciting data. If I can move us ahead to our cell phone violations, this was so inspiring. Yeah, if you look at, there's so many things I want to call out here, but we are obviously really proud of this work. If you take a look at some piece of this data here, so for example, at the conclusion of last school year, cell phone violations were actually in one of the top 3 referred behaviors. I pulled the top 5 for you tonight, and it didn't show up. So that's really exciting. The cell phone violations don't show up frequently at all at the elementary level. I called out Cantrick separately because that is our only 5-6 building. It does have over 600 students, and yet we're only looking at 24 cell phone violations this year. So that's a testament to some really excellent policy planning and some hard work around our teachers and our administrators. You will notice just a little bump at the 12th grade level, and that was some conversation that I've had with the high school. And it is natural to see, I think, when you put a microscope on something and you really tighten the margin for error, if you will, that you may see a little bump like that. But in our first year with this rollout, this is really exciting. Something else, couple things that is also really inspiring about this is that, we are 2.5 years in to using Kickboard, and we pull that data pretty regularly. And something that was so cool was the first couple months of the school year to see the positive, because we track positives as well, being participates in class, popping up as a top positive behavior at the secondary levels immediately. We've not seen that before. So I think you can surmise from that if we are disengaged from cell phones, our engagement in class has increased as well. Also interesting too is fights, drama, for lack of a better word, as well, has decreased significantly. And I really believe this is quality work. And when we take away exposure to social media and those types of disruptive devices, this is an example of what that can really do. So,
Question, if I can, Jackie,
yes,
real quick.
please, yes,
So for 24-25, that's the entire school year?
yes, sir.
And then obviously it's 92 days into 25-26. So
Yes.
ratioing up both 11th and 12th are obviously going to have probably more violations this year than last year. By the end of the year.
So we're only halfway.
We're a little over halfway.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
he said 92. I'm like, in there 180? We're pretty close.
No,
I'm
we're-
thinking it was different.
No.
Go ahead.
Anyway, I guess my expectation would be interesting to see the data next year is that 11th, 12th, of course, they're used to having their cell phones.
Yeah.
So that's probably why there's more violations.
Yeah.
So hopefully, from looking at the 9th and 10th grade data, they're getting used to not having cell phones. So my expectation is next year, 11th and 12th should drop down quite a bit.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
The anecdotal feedback around it, I won't go into that because some of it feels kind of confidential, but the anecdotal data is really impressive.
So the policy says you cannot have your cell phone out from the time you walk into school
Correct.
until the end of the day.
At the high school level, it is off and
Yeah.
away all day.
So my question becomes, how are there that many cell phone violations? Is it because they're not putting them away? Is it like, I'm just trying to
I mean,
follow along
students
here?
they're children and they're still going to test the boundaries, right? They're still going to see what they can get
So they're
away
not,
with.
okay.
So those are,
That was a long conversation of where do the phones go? How are they going to be put away? Where are they going to be? What's it going to be? So I was really expecting almost like a zero number here. Like I really was.
They get innovative.
Not completely, but you know
Well,
what I
but you have to
mean?
remember though, so we can demand that a child turn in their phone, put it in the box, right? End of the day, we're not patting kids down. And so if that's why we talk about if the behaviors increase, then they can get into further discipline.
I
And
was just
so,
curious.
yep.
I just based on the policy. This is the first data we've had. Really, we had some before, but really useful
I think
data.
you're right, though. I mean, if you look at how far we are in the school year, 90-ish days, it's 2 cell phone violations per day for the entire 12th grade. That's pretty minimal.
But the policy went in this year,
Mm-hmm.
and it's higher than total of last year.
I don't
And
believe
last
it
year, they
was-
were allowed to have it whenever they wanted. I
I
mean,
don't-
they had it
Well, I
on
think
them.
that's the point. I don't think it was enforced with fidelity.
fidelity.
Yeah.
Last year.
What does Steve say?
Exactly right. We are, it's a major thing that we're focusing on this year. The district has a focus on it. We had a policy last year where kids can have it out in the hallways and during lunch. It's not that way anymore. We are also inconsistent in our building and enforcing in the classrooms. We are striving every day to improve consistency, and we're doing a heck of a job with it this year, and I expect it to be much lower next year.
Yeah. And Steve's done excellent work, just really reinforcing that policy with teachers and continually reinforcing that policy with students as well. So I think the data is really encouraging. And like I said, the other pieces, what is on paper only tells us one piece. But when you look at some of those other things that just are not happening with the same frequency, it's awesome.
Yeah, the other grades are just, astounding. And
It's cool. It's cool. Yeah. Okay, so if we can move ahead to looking at secondary tardies, one of the questions the board had was how many tardies are first hour versus later in the day? So that's a great question.
Yeah.
As I started to pull that data, one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that TFT and Knights United, that's our, homeroom, doesn't occur with the same schedule. So to be able to present that to you visually was very, very difficult. So what I did was I gave you an apples to apples across secondary with the core classes, 6 hours. And then over on the left is the numbers for tardies that occur during each individual school's TFT time. So with this data in mind, and obviously first hour presents as the most significant for tardies. But with this in mind, I would like to talk to you, and Brian, this speaks a bit to what you were talking about getting into the weeds. I'd like to take a look at a really stellar example of PBIS in action at Monroe High School. So up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see, if you can make it out, the PBIS components. I'm not going to belabor the point with that because I know Andrew and I have gone over that a couple times. But on the left, you'll see steps to setting a PBIS goal is laid out for you. And I don't know if we've gone over this in such detail, but you always look at your data first. So we come together as a committee and we look at the school's overall data. We determine what piece of that data we're going to focus on. We create an action plan. then we come together after the window for that goal has commenced, and we are either celebrating the success of that goal, or we are reteaching expectations and deciding where to go from there to further intervene. So with that in mind, when we set the goal that I am speaking of at a PBIS meeting, we use the system of a SMART goal. And that just really helps ensure that those goals are data-driven, that they are specific, that they are measurable, that they are in fact attainable, and relevant to your data, and that they are time-bound. So it's a very specific process. When this goal was set by Monroe High School, they had looked at their data and noticed that freshmen had the largest number of tardies throughout the building. So we looked at the previous 6 weeks and with the goal of them reducing tardies over the next 6 weeks. We then took a tier 2 intervention group as well, and the goal for that group was to decrease by individual student. Now, this was to get to a baseline. Our goal coming up, or our plan, I should say, coming up, is that we are going to come together again and set a similar goal where we can map the success of this over the building as a whole and look at reducing tardies 9th through 12th grade. So what goes into this work is also setting an action plan and the components of that. So what the high school did for this particular goal was they held a class meeting with all of the freshman students to discuss the goal and identify the problem. They implemented hall sweeps. Hall sweeps are really effective in that they are unpredictable and they are inconsistent means of catching students in common areas, hallways, bathrooms, things like that, when they least expect it. And then they also did hourly announcements, which were provided by Michael Foley, reminding students, let's get to class. They were great. And then Steve provided a reminder of the attendance policy to all staff, and there were incentives provided. And I really need to take a second and highlight that our community, when we have reached out to support in the celebration process, they are so behind the work and they are so generous. And so for this particular goal, all I had to do was ask Chick-fil-A and they were like, yep. And they gave gift cards to the entire freshman class. And then Sodexo stepped up, and for the tier 2 students, which was, I believe, 13, they also got a coupon for a cookie. So it's just a way to say we value this, we acknowledge the success we've had. So when you look at the outcome data, the initial window of time was 39 days, the first 6 weeks of school. That window counted for 39 days. The next goal window was November 3rd to December 12th. That was 28 days. They went from 1,256 down to 457. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. Looking ahead, obviously, we've got a great baseline now. We can look to reduce that number the next time we set the goal. What I want to show you in this slide is our tier 2.
Isn't that an 11-day difference, though, in calculation?
Yes, it is
So
showing.
what would be the percentage of those 11 days calculated in there? Because you know what I'm saying?
It's, well,
Yeah, because, I mean, it's still a decrease, but you know what I mean? Because there is a big difference in the number of days.
so if you take a look over here at the tier 2 group, this was also really exciting data. 76% of students in that group reduced the number of tardies by 12 or more, and 100% of them had a reduction. So this is really exciting work. There was a lot of action planning that went into it, and we were really proud of that. So does that provide for you, Brian, a little bit of what that looks like in the weeds, kind of how that system and process works?
So
Great.
they went from a 32-day average to a 16 tardies per day average.
Good.
Thank you for doing the math.
It's just the way it was presented. It was so off.
My apologies.
No, not your apologies. You put a lot of work into this. You did a good job.
Thank you, Darla. I appreciate it.
Like, we used to do PBIS a little differently, you know, when we didn't know better. 20, 25 years ago, we would give all the kids that had all A's movie and popcorn, or we'd get, everybody who had no attendance, no absences.
Yeah. It's
Ice
much,
cream, but, the ones that are struggling with it, those are the ones we got to reach. So that's what you're doing by setting these goals.
And being really intentional around looking at our data and the process around that. We are incredibly consistent with this work. These meetings happen monthly. We have a set committee that works on this. This data is provided to them. The process is the same month over month. So we're really proud of that work. I think as a district, it's definitely a point of pride, because you're right, Carrie. It hasn't always looked that way in other buildings or other districts. If we can look at the next slide, this is something, and I would like to apologize up front about this. This was really difficult information to acquire. So if you take a look, I know some of the information on the upper left is information that you may have seen before, so I'm not going to belabor the point on that. As far as local PBIS districts that I can ascertain for sure is Airport, Dundee, Ida, and Erie Mason. I know that at least as of 2025, those schools were PBIS districts. Again, it was oddly not easy information to come by. If we can look over to the right, I want to draw your attention to Wayne County. Wayne County is a huge implementer of PBIS. And most of the schools in that district use MyStar, which is akin to PowerSchool. Their regional education system, which is Wayne RESA, actually supports that software, if you will. And they had an individual who has since retired, but he worked with their programmers to actually set up the PBIS data, how they pull it and what that system looks like. Detroit Public Schools has since parted ways, and they now have moved to PowerSchool, and I believe that was a move as of this year. They are utilizing incident management to track their data. It is referrals only. It does not drill down the way that we are able to do with Kickboard. And I will also tell you, I have heard firsthand that they are having quite a tough time with it. When we look at Monroe County, many of our schools in Monroe County use Infinite Campus, which also tracks referrals. Admittedly, I don't know much about that program. I know that some of the schools that are utilizing PBIS and utilizing that program are utilizing the paper bucks system. So we talk about points, like positive points and things like that. You can't drill down to specifics as easily that way. You can count the cards, right? Some of the cards that I've seen in past years will show where it happened and you can mark it off, but it's very labor intensive. It's not very time efficient. And again, you simply do not get the granular data that Kickboard provides for us.
So are the schools in Monroe County that are using Infinite Campus, is that the four listed under the local PBIS districts?
I'm going to be honest with you, Darla, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I just know.
We'll actually
Yeah.
help with that. Airport and Monroe Public Schools use
PowerSchool.
PowerSchool, okay? And all the rest of the schools in the county use,
Infinite Campus.
yep. And so,
Of the list you have here?
yeah, so only us and
There's only
Airport.
4 schools on the
But
list.
No, that's
On the
Mr. Shaw is speaking, like for Infinite Campus versus Power School. It's Airport and Monroe on Power School, everyone else in the county, regardless of if they use PBIS or not. So it's there's more schools in the county than those 4.
Yeah. Is there any using Kickboard type thing? Is that what Infinite Campus?
No.
Anybody else using
Kickboard,
anything like
Kickboard
that?
is specific to PowerSchool. You think about it as an app
So
that
if they're
they
using
offer.
PowerSchool, they could be using Kickboard.
Could be, I'm not sure.
Airport could be, yes.
Yeah, it's
They
just,
would-
it's
They would
just
not be using,
interesting
they would
to-
not be using
Yeah.
Infinite Campus.
Kickboard, in a lot of ways, pulls a lot of data for us that some of those other systems are just not able to get
So you
that
remember that.
granular. And then, like I said, I know, I can speak to one of the districts in Wayne County that I know that isn't utilizing Kickboard, but is implementing PBIS, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge setting that software up.
So PowerSchool is our student data system. Okay, so that's for all our stuff. So you have to have one. And so for Monroe and Airport have been with PowerSchool for a long time. I can't remember if it was Airport first and then Monroe or vice versa. No, Monroe was first.
That I don't know.
Yep. So Monroe was first, and it had to do with that, Monroe wanted a more robust student data system than what was being offered at the county level. And so 5 years ago, I think it was, county went back through and did not choose Power School. Monroe stayed put and went to Infinite Campus. And so as Jackie said, that for these other schools, Power School districts might use Kickboard. That's just a seamless data, way to collect the data.
Yeah.
Like they said in the past, Swiss was the way that they did it, or other programs. So
How many schools are in our district?
there's 9 county schools.
9.
So this next portion is going to talk about the impact PBIS has had on our
No,
buses.
There's more using it. She only got them to share who's doing what.
No, we know.
And I'm going to take a minute to go over our bus referral data. So if you'll look at this slide, you can see that our referrals, although they sit below last year's total, and again, obviously this is not a year-end total that I can provide to you at this time. It's important to note when looking at this, we did experience some implementation difficulties. The way, and I won't get into the weeds with this, but the way that we set Kickboard up to be able to be utilized on the buses requires TransFinder and Power School to talk to each other. There was some technical difficulties, which I don't really understand the depth of them, but that prevented that for the first couple months of the school year. So we are at a bit of a disadvantage with those numbers because of getting that piece up and running. But our buses did recently set a PBIS goal with our district around kindness. And as you can see, we are still sitting below where we were at for bus referrals last year.
So there was a period of time of a few months that nothing was documented.
No, so referrals were documented because bus drivers were submitting them through paper, and Trista Geyer, she was submitting them for us. So yeah, the referral data is accurate. As far as being able to implement those more robust pieces that we did the second half of last year, we needed to get Kickboard up and running to be able to do that, and we couldn't do that until those two systems were functioning together. So what I'd like to do now, are there any other questions about this portion? And I'm sorry, I should have paused to ask.
If that trends the way it's trending, there will be more referrals this year than last year.
So something that we are
But
working.
we also have the additional bus aids and whatnot, right?
So something that we need to take into consideration, like I said, is that there's some planning work that will be mapping what we did last year onto what we're going to be doing going forward. So like I said, I think some of that, like PBIS supports positive incentives and celebrating those achievements. And being able to do that piece of it was not feasible until we were able to get Kickboard up and running. So Patty and I actually have been discussing what we want that next piece to look like to help from a tier 1 standpoint, reteach bus expectations and get some of those pieces in place. So, any other questions? Okay. What I would like to do now is introduce a couple of our drivers because as I've shared with you, what you see on paper is just one part of the story. And so I would like to start by introducing Ashley R. Scott. Ashley, if you want to come on up. Ashley has been with the district for 1.5 years, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about setting bus goals and utilizing PBIS.
Hello, how are we? Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ashley R. Scott, and like she said, I've been with the district for about 1.5 years now. I've been a licensed driver for just over a year. When I started and became a licensed driver, I was struggling to connect, especially with my Custer students. I was trying to figure out who I wanted to be as a bus driver and who they needed me to be as a bus driver. When I started, I entered a bus that didn't have a steady driver at the time. So behaviors were fluctuating and they didn't know what to expect and how to follow PBIS. So during that struggle, I had a meeting with Jackie and Andrew, and we talked about setting a goal for PBIS, and what I felt like the bus needed the most was respect. The students weren't respecting me as their driver, they weren't respecting each other, and they weren't respecting themselves. And that was our big goal that we needed to work on my bus. So we set this goal, We were going to get 600 positive respect points for March. And when they hit the goal, we would celebrate. I would provide some kind of reward, some big thing. We were going to celebrate. When I told my students, we defined respect as a group. So we knew what they were expected to be, what their role was to be, how, behavior wise. So when you look at the kindergartners, they knew what respect was. So we weren't just saying a word, we were defining it together as a whole. And we made a list of what fell under that umbrella. I reminded them how the point system worked and how their positive points they get to use in school for rewards and prizes and whatnot. Some do like movie days and bring a teddy bear to school. Those points that you earn on the bus are the same points you get in school, and it adds to the total. And a lot of my students were very excited about that. I did have a couple that were like, well, I don't really care, but what are you gonna do, right? So as we went on, points were going up. It was working. If we had a little bit of a behavior problem, I just had to remind them, hey, we have that goal, right? We're gonna be respectful, and we got right back on track. Also during this time, to help with our goal, I had the opportunity to have lunch with some of my students that were struggling more and sit down and ask them, how I could be a better driver to them, just in general, how their school day was going. And then one of my favorite questions was, what should our reward be at the end of the month? And I think my favorite recommendation was I was to buy a whole cake and cut it on the bus, and hand it out. Not very practical, but it was my favorite recommendation. And we had conversations that really connected, and I think they understood that I wasn't just someone who, hey, sit down, and I cared about their safety, and that's where that I need you to sit down, please, was coming from. I need you to do this because safety envelopes all. When it came time for them to spend their points in school that they've earned, I think a lot of my students realized how many points they were earning on the bus. And I cry every time I think about this, I'm sorry. I had students who had never earned a positive point all year be able to participate and earn a reward. And they came to me just thrilled, and you could see the light bulbs going off, like they understood it now because somebody was seeing the positive and not just the negative. And we were focusing on that positive. The end of March, we hit our goal. And I provided all my students with a goodie bag full of candy and little toys and trinkets. And then we decided as a whole to keep making goals for the rest of the year because we felt that it really worked and we really connected. And those connections have lasted. While I don't have most of my students that I had last year, I do have some. And starting, if you look at the beginning of last year when I had them versus the beginning of this year, it's been phenomenal. Students that I wouldn't be able to talk to because they would shut down, I can have full conversations with now. And we can, hey, what's going on? Well, I feel this way. And that is huge for them. That is not something they get out of everybody. So to be one of those people that can reach them is overwhelming. And I've brought that onto my bus this year as well. Having connections to the point that I let my Custer kids this year pick out my hair colors. They were very excited when I got on the bus with blue and pink hair, and this has all been rooted because of PBIS and the skill sets that we were taught, and it really just builds connections and helps And when it comes to like referrals, we're still going to have referrals because we all have bad days and we all have those moments. But focusing on the positive, we're going to have less of them, especially with the students who need it most. Thank you.
Thank you.
Something that's really, really cool about what Ashley shared with you is that that is another example of that tiered support. So when Ashley was talking about, she set the goal, she taught the expectations bus-wide, and then she went in and met with a small group of students that were struggling. That's mapping that tiered support over top of transportation the way that we do in our schools. And that kind of consistency is really powerful. The next individual that I want to introduce is Eddie Hall. Eddie is currently our dispatcher. He's been with the district for 2 years, and he's going to talk a little bit about PBIS before and after. So,
how you guys doing? She already said everything I wanted to say. Of course, I had to go second, right? Honestly, just PBIS has made me it's made me be able to engage with some of the bad kids too. It's not just the good kids. Because before I was one of those guys to where I would bring candy for them, but the good kids. But now I can actually give candy to some of the bad kids too, realizing that like they're probably not getting some of that stuff at home either. So between that and the CPI and the trauma training, everything that we're doing right now is amazing. I've learned how to communicate with not only just the bad kids when it comes to trauma, but also the good kids too, because you don't know if good kids are going through trauma. You don't know that. Everybody always thinks that because you're bad that you got to be going through some sort of trauma. It's always the bad kids, but like good kids go through trauma too. You know what I mean? And I mean, just the practices that she taught us and being able to be able to engage with every kid. And I'm just you see, I got the bracelets on my wrist. I'm a guy to where I can communicate with kids regardless of PBIS. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I love my kids, I love my students, and I couldn't see myself not being a bus driver anymore. Like, I love this position, and I really don't know what else to say. I just want to keep it short and sweet for you guys, If you guys got any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer it. Other questions?
Give me a great experience that you had that just makes you smile.
Great experience. I just had one today. So now I am a dispatcher. So I actually did one of my old routes, the Bowles Harbor route, and pulling up to the bus stop and seeing those parents out there Mr. Eddie, my daughter, she loves you. And it's like they're all giving me hugs. And it's just like, it's heartbreaking. It's melting me because at the end of the day, I would have never thought I'd be a bus driver ever in my life. I didn't just wake up and be like, yeah, when I grow up, I want to be a bus driver. Who wants to do that? You know what I'm saying? But like now that I am, like I said, I could not see me doing anything different. The kids and the engagement with the kids, they love me. The parents love me. And
Didn't you drive us?
I drove you. And the fact that you remember that, right?
Yep.
Was I a good driver?
And I'm going to tell you right now, it was a great experience.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that was me. I think I took my do-rag off probably. Had the do-rag on, but. So I'm the one who handles like the routing system. I'm the one who handles all the trip requests. All that comes through me now.
But you're saying you drive a bus?
When we have 15 call-offs, you gotta still drive every once in a while. So I'm pretty much driving every day until we get into the position to where, I can ease off the driving a little bit and focus more on the office work. So.
We'll see. You probably won't like the office work.
Trust me, I be in there trying to catch myself, trying to stay awake sometimes. I'm used to driving. That's what I did for the last 2-3 years. So, any other questions for me?
Thank you.
All right.
Monroe Public Schools is lucky to have you too.
I appreciate that.
yeah, Eddie offers a unique perspective in the sense that, as I mentioned, he was here for the before and the after. So,
And we experienced him as a driver, so we have firsthand.
we love him.
I just
Yep.
hope I was a good driver.
You were a great driver.
I'm trying to put on my A game, guys.
You did.
So Patty's going to speak for a minute too. Patty's been with our district for 8 years, and as you guys know, she is our transportation director.
All right, so all my time has been spent in transportation. So I've been here before PBIS and then with PBIS being implemented in the transportation. So for me, I get both perspectives and it has been night and day. Eddie, which knows I'm going to say this, He came in my office and was ready to quit. Like, I can't do this. There is no way. I can't handle these kids. And that's a pretty common occurrence that's happened. You know, we talked through it. We've got these programs coming. We worked the training. He would go to the schools and have lunches. Put the work into it. And the result is he found that joy of what he wanted to do. He does get to drive some because we're short today. Ashley's put in the work. Their stories are just a couple of, hundreds that I have from my staff. The unbelievers who went and had lunch with a couple of kids and were like, that changed me completely. And I'm telling you, these came from other school districts that weren't doing PBIS. They put up with all the trainings that the district and Jackie allowed me to do. They put in the work and the time and the effort. I had a driver who said, I can't get through to these two kids. Please go have lunch with them. We set up lunch. She figured out the one kid was just like her growing up. And the other one had moved 8 times the school year before and was held back. So she felt worthless. So that one lunch, half hour with those kids, changed the directory for the rest of the school year. The change happened that afternoon. And that is the kind of stories that we can't surpass the time that we're putting in for this. I know we didn't start doing kickboard till November, and it was just the drivers to start. Now they all get to do it. So we're getting logged information from the safety monitors, from the bus monitors, from the drivers. And they're logging the good behavior, the bad behavior. And that makes it a data that we can keep building upon. But the biggest thing is without the programming and without the training and them putting in the work, we wouldn't have the less kids being suspended off the bus. We wouldn't have the kids losing their transportation. They want to be on the bus. And that's a complete 360. And that goes to the district doing the work. So I want to thank you guys from me seeing it from before and after and watching drivers walk away because of kids' behavior to now they feel heard, they feel supported, and they're seeing results. And it's all to the good and benefit of our students. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty and Ashley and Eddie. Thank you, guys. Sorry. The last section that we're going to talk about.
We're going to take a pause right here.
Yes,
So,
okay.
I think this is going to create some conversation. And
Okay.
that's going to look about.
Okay.
5-minute break, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So if you take a look up here, there was a request for an overview of scheduling and cost around social emotional learning. So that'll bring us to the end of our presentation this evening. So if we look at SEL instructional schedules across our district, I want to make note that this data pertains specifically to scripted SEL curriculum, essentially trails. And I want to point out that if you'll see here, 55% of the schools in our district provide scripted SEL weekly. The rest of them are looking at doing it bi-weekly, monthly, or quarterly. So we would expect that we would see that decrease in frequency as students move up through the grades. That variation is because those foundational components of social emotional learning, which are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, that's cumulative. Those skills become more habitual and more familiar year over year. So a decrease in time spent makes sense there because it shifts to an as-needed basis. It is important to note that you'll see on the right, 100% of our buildings provide access to Tier 2 and Tier 3 SEL support. So I want to call your attention back to that small handful of kindergarten students that showed aggressive physical behavior, right? Those are prime examples of students that would be supported by this Tier 2 and Tier 3 work. That sort of instruction happens primarily during periods such as lunch bunch or intervention and enrichment time. Those are blocks that are already built into our day. I want to make sure that we understand that instructional minutes and the academic core, like the Common Core state standards, those are imposed on us by the state of Michigan. So teachers do not have that freedom to override, supplant instructional minutes with SEL instruction or reduce the curriculum. That's not an option that we have. A vast majority of SEL time takes place during morning meetings within our buildings. That is already identified within our schedule. So there's time carved out for that already.
Is that when the circles and stuff happen?
So circles.
I have the SEL from last time.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
circles
referring to.
can be less predictable because sometimes those can be proactive, sometimes those can be
I thought they had
reactive.
like a circle thing in the morning. Is that the meeting you're talking about?
Some
Okay.
absolutely, yes, absolutely. And some, yes, absolutely. But I want to make sure to point out that during times where one of our staff members may push in and perform a longer lesson around social emotional learning, that does not mean that curriculum gets skipped or cut down. That is, I was a teacher myself in the classroom for 14 years. You don't have that luxury. So when those opportunities present themselves, oh my goodness.
That you were supposed to be out of here by. That was to alert us. Good job, Jackie.
Sorry about that. It's my evening medication alarm. So teachers don't have that luxury, and that means that they are very adept at being flexible and pivoting when they need to find the other opportunities throughout the day to provide the other instruction that just shifts. It's just a shifting. It's not a reduction. It's not an override. It's not an elimination. So something else that I want to point out is that SEL is not just scripted curriculum. The vast majority of the SEL that we do is embedded in the work that we do. That is the 15-second intervention that our teachers have under most all circumstances when behavior occurs. Something else that I want us to really think about is that when students experience conflict, right, with one another, that can impact attendance, especially in the upper grades, because you start to see the avoidant behaviors, right, because they are experiencing peer-to-peer conflict, and that's uncomfortable. So when students seek out folks like our restorative practice coordinators, which 100% of these folks can attest to the fact that students seek them out regularly, that's really important because that helps keep students in class.
And what else that helps with is the teacher themselves is able to continue teaching so that the restorative practice coordinator can get in and proactively support around student conflict before it erupts into something larger and before the teacher has to stop what she is doing to address student conflict. So I think that's really important to take into consideration when we look at this. Our data tells us that many of our referrals happen in the classroom, and a lot of those instances can be conflict-based. So there's some really incredible work that happens, but it does not supplant instruction time or curriculum. So, are there any questions about this slide? So if we take a look at the last slide here, this is a breakdown of the cost for social emotional learning in our district. If you take a look on the left-hand side, it denotes the item, and then the two middle columns suggest quantity and the estimated cost, the budget that it comes out of, and any additional notes. So you'll see that kickboard itself comes out of the general fund. It's embedded in the Power School cost, so you can't separate that out. Social workers account for 11 within the district at a cost of $850,000. That comes from our general fund and our 31A. We have 3 at the high school, 2 at Cantrick, 1 at Custer, Hollywood, Manor, the middle school, Raisinville, and Waterloo. If you move further down, you'll see that we have 6 restorative practice coordinators at a cost of $700,000. That comes from our 31A and our Title I budget. We have 1 at Custer, Manor, Hollywood, Raisinville, and Orchard. You'll notice PBIS coordinators. There are 2 of us. That is at a cost of $200,000. That comes out of our 31A budget. Dean of Students, we have 5 at a cost of $550,000. That comes from our general fund. We have 2 at the high school, 1 at the middle school, Cantrick and Custer. And then our restorative practice analysts, there's 1 at $150,000. The budget, that comes out of 31A, stationed at Cantrick. And then we have registered behavior technicians, or RBTs, as we refer to them. We have 13 at a cost of $550,000. That comes out of our general fund and our 31A. We have 10 RBTs and 3 behavior techs. And then our BCBAs, we have 2 of those, and at a cost of $200,000, and that comes out of our 31A fund. So that is a cost breakdown to pair with our social emotional schedule.
And I just realized, Jackie, on the restorative practice coordinators, I missed Monroe High School on the list of schools that has one. So I apologize.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The, where there's 6, I only listed 5 buildings. Monroe High is the 6th building that has a restorative practice coordinator.
Okay.
But Monroe
Thank you,
Middle
Cassie.
doesn't, huh?
No, there's 6. I have listed 5 buildings, but I have the number right. I have buildings.
So I hope this evening's information kind of gave you a better understanding of what the PBIS process looks like in action and how that maps with multi-tiered systems of support, and also how we are really extending that process in other areas across the district.
I think the other main question we had, and I know I had it, along with cost, was the amount of time in a day. Because when I looked at the SEL packet you gave last time, and just some of the conversations between then, and I remember the presentation you gave in the front room, because that was a detailed presentation as well. And you look at the restorative circles, you look at the peer-to-peer stuff, you look at all of those things, like, what I have a difficulty grasping is how much out of the day is truly spent out of the day where students would be gaining instruction. So if there's something I'm not grasping that. Like, I don't know how much time.
So if we could start first at tier 1, about, because I know that was basically that was your graph right there. So at tier 1, at the elementary level, 1 time a week, or what does that look like? That's at tier 1 that all students.
So this is SEL, which is separate from PBIS.
That's exactly where we're at.
Yes, yeah. I was looking in my mind, I combined the 2 because when we're looking at money, because this SEL cost is PBIS as well. On this chart you just
Yes,
gave us.
yes,
Yeah.
that is
So it
correct.
included
That
the
is
cost for
correct.
two, so if
Yeah.
I'm comparing the cost for both of them, I would be looking for the time spent for both of them. Because that way we can correlate how much time is spent on this, what are the outcomes, and what are the costs? Huh?
You
I
can't
just
break,
don't
you
know.
can't break it down that way.
Yeah, I don't think that's a,
It's,
yeah. you-
because PBIS
you
is
almost
how
need a
to
special
behavior,
time
so-
clock for that.
Well, I'm just saying, like, how long does a circle, one of these circles take, like, you know, is
So
that
but
something?
That's a great question though, but it wouldn't be, those things are a tier 2 and a tier
Right.
3 intervention. Like that's based on need. Where at the high school, students receive 1 period per month of SEL. Middle school receives 1 period per week, not class time, TFT. Orchard is the same. So like the tier 1 is what everyone gets. And there might be an altered schedule, but no one is missing the math or instruction, so to speak. But like, yes, students may be pulled out of class because
Because of behavior.
Terry did something horrible to me and I had to hit her. So, we needed to have a restorative circle.
One thing I may
It's
bring
just hard
clarity.
for us to calculate without having all of the pieces.
Well, one thing that might bring clarity is when Jackie was alluding to a circle, at the very beginning of the day, this is me being really old, we call it our seat time, you know, coming together. And so, but I know that going in our classrooms, we come together and they go through calendar, do all these other.
Circles, yeah. Go ahead.
So a lot of times, teachers do this beautiful dance all day long, balancing time and the curriculum they need to teach and the needs of the students that are before them at that moment. So, sometimes, the whole class, she might take 5 minutes and just talk to everybody about recess behavior and, what I expect from you before I take you outside for recess. And then the kids go outside, they play, and that's just a scheduled time. Like at the elementary, we do have time built into the curriculum for students to have recess. And then they come back into the classroom and they'll debrief on, what happened at recess time. We also have, at the elementary level, teachers might call it morning meeting, they might call it calendar time, but it's usually at the start of the day where they bring their class together and they might celebrate somebody's birthday, they might acknowledge, somebody who did something really special in the community or within the school. So those opportunities for social emotional learning, like they're built into the day. And also, on our report card, we do have things that we acknowledge in the report card marking, such as follows directions, takes turns, uses resources wisely, sharing, those kinds of things. Because like we do teach children how to do those things, especially young children. We got to teach them how to line up. We have to teach them to raise their hand when they want to talk. So, those things are embedded within the school day itself. So it's hard to quantify like a number of minutes that's spent.
So it would be better to use the data and cost in order to calculate the program from a cost standpoint. Because if we can't do that, that data is the only 2 data points we have. Fair enough?
Well, I think student achievement is a related set of data to this, right? Because as behaviors start to decrease, instructional time starts to increase, and that can contribute to higher student achievement. So I feel like instead of looking at it in its own bubble and trying to control for different variables, we're not able to necessarily do that in this situation because it is so interconnected, because it's part of those 3 tiers that you were talking about in MTSS at the very beginning. And MTSS is also like the academic supports, right? Academic supports come in 3 tiers as well. You have whole group instruction, tier 1, you have smaller group instruction, tier 2, and then you have very small group or individual instruction, tier 3. So like those systems are so integrated that I don't know if we could adequately control just to pull SEL's value or to pull PBIS's value.
Thank you. But we still, at this point, we have to look at cost, we have to look at, that's our job, you know? So I always want to look at it and say, what is the most data I can do when we are looking at financial, because we're going to have a meeting coming up in March that's going to be looking at where money's being spent. And so, you know, that's why that was important to me, because I'm like, okay, I want to be able to do that right. I need the data points to do that right. And if we can't do all of that, there has to be some way to.
But I would also argue too, please remember that when we bring forth in March, we'll be bringing forth recommendations because it's the day-to-day operations of each building is uniquely different. A Raiseville is going to have needs than a Custer, than to the 5-6. And so we'll keep everything as equitable, but we have processes in place already inside our school district that we're required to do. So when we bring forth the recommendations of changes, yes, is that page you're looking at right there. There will be items most likely on this page that will have shifts.
Particularly the ones that are affect the general fund.
Yeah.
Something else I think that is a lot harder to measure when you think about data and outcomes too is the degree to which social emotional learning and skill sets map over career readiness, right? Like we can't go into businesses and ask, you know, what are you seeing and what are you not seeing? That's a little bit more difficult. But the understanding is that these skills are important in the workplace as well. So that's something that we need to be really.
Yeah, emotional intelligence has been the buzzword for a little while now. Well, sure, we'll move on to something else, but sometimes just awareness at a meeting.
Yeah.
Are you just sometimes you look at people's behavior and like I can't believe you're not being aware.
And
But-
learning how to resolve
But
conflict.
once again, it goes back to what you're teaching. There are things that happen in that person's day before they got to the meeting that could have totally thrown them off, right? They may have had a kid who threw up. Just they're walking out the door, or a dog who decided that they wanted to throw up. So, sometimes we judge each other, and I'm like, but we don't know the full story. That doesn't mean that you still have to perform, but that does give you a tool. So people who are better at being attuned to that and listening,
Self-regulation.
a different form of listening than just what I'm hearing, but looking a little bit deeper. So I think that some of these soft skills that we're trying to work on now are very important, Darla. And I'm not sure we can put a complete price tag on them. I do respect, though, your point is that everything should have an ROI attached to it. But I think sometimes that's going to be a little trickier. It's more, I think for this particular case, I think it's more embedded in the PBIS results than it is in looking at actual how much time was taken out of the classroom day, whether it was 5 minutes today or it was 2.5 minutes the day before.
That's what I said, let's use the data and the cost as data points. Yeah. Yeah.
How long
Yeah.
can you keep them?
So Jackie, you did extremely well.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
You're okay.
Thank you, Jackie.
So, as promised, Andrea just wants to give you a real fast overview for tomorrow night, okay? So that way we can just make tomorrow night happen. Andrea, just so you know, you have 6.3
I'm going to
minutes.
speed talk.
Okay. She just wants to give you an idea of what she's put together. So as soon as this thing boots up.
All right. I think I still have a little charge left on my computer, so we should be all right.
We're going to be very kind.
Okay, so I am just going to talk quickly through the first 6 slides that are in the presentation that you have inside of your packet. And I wanted to do this tonight because we have lots of data points that we're going to look at tomorrow evening, and I know we're going to have a lot of conversation around the numbers that you see. So I want to allow enough time for that tomorrow night, and then for tonight to be really just laying the foundation and giving you an understanding of what data you are going to look at and what that means when you're looking at those numbers. So that's what these first 6 slides are. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and get started.
So we're going to be talking tomorrow about the iReady diagnostic. So just to review really quick, the purpose of an iReady diagnostic, it is a vertically aligned adaptive assessment that's designed to measure student learning progress from early elementary, starting in kindergarten through our 8th grade at middle school. As students progress through grades, the diagnostic demands and scores do change. So it is not a static, like if you get a 300 in every single grade, you're proficient. That changes depending on your grade. As students advance, the diagnostic increases in its cognitive demand, its content complexity, and its skill integration. And that's just due to that increasing rigor. And because of that, the scores are not expected to remain static year over year. Growth is not just measured by proficiency, and it reflects mastery of progressively more complex standards if you are proficient. Again, that rigor as you progress through grades does increase in that cognitive demand, the content complexity, and skill integration. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that plays out if you're a K2, a 3-5, or a 6-8 student taking the iReady diagnostic. So we take that diagnostic and then in ELA and in math. So I want to show you just how the rigor increases. And when we talk about proficiency, think about this in terms of buckets. So how big your bucket needs to be in kindergarten in order to be proficient, what it needs to look like in grades 3-5 and in 6-8. So in K2, if you're a kindergarten through 2nd grade student for ELA, your diagnostic is focused heavily on your foundational literacy skills. And what that translates into is your letter recognition, phonological awareness, and phonics. Many of your questions are basic vocabulary and sentence comprehension, lots of listening comprehension skills, simple understanding. A K2 student would see questions that are single-skilled, concrete, and highly scaffolded, which means that there are short passages or just an isolated word. There's heavy visual support for our K2 students, and there's a limited need for them to do any inferring or analysis within those questions. So we're just looking at foundational literacy skills in K2. As students then progress to grades 3 through 5, this is where we have the shift. And you've heard me say this before, that in 3rd grade, it's a pivotal grade because we shift from learning how to read to reading to learn. So learning to read, reading to learn. So we're now talking about the comprehension piece that comes into play. So students in grades 3 through 5 start to see multi-paragraph informational and literary texts. They see vocabulary not just in isolation, but it's now in context, and they must use text-based evidence within their answers. It's the beginning of that inferential thinking, and writing conventions and language structure are now a part of that diagnostic. So in simpler terms, it's longer, more complex texts. You have an increased emphasis on your comprehension strategies. Questions often require synthesizing information across an entire passage. So rather than just getting a one question, you now have a passage and you need to synthesize information. And there's a reduction in the scaffolds and the visuals that are provided for students at this grade level. And then when we get to the highest level, grades 6 through 8, that diagnostic focuses on advanced literacy and analytical thinking, where you now have complex informational and literary texts. You are determining things such as author's purpose, their tone, their craft, why they've written a passage the way that they have, why they've chosen the vocabulary that they have, what their message or main idea, central idea, theme might be within the passage. You're doing an analysis of multiple ideas and claims. You have argumentative reasoning and evidence evaluation that comes in, and academic vocabulary across disciplines. So those texts are often very dense with abstract themes. They have a higher lexile demand or reading level. Questions are often multi-step, which requires students to do analysis, comparison, and justification of their answers. So not just choosing an answer, but saying why that is the best answer in that scenario. And students must independently apply skills without explicit prompts. So your scaffolds are really disappearing at this grade. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of how ELA rigor increases. So when we look at data throughout grades, especially with that cohort, you can see what students might have been tested in K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8. And then walking through the same thing, that increasing rigor in the math diagnostic. In K2, it is about conceptual understanding and number sense. Kindergarten through second grade students, their diagnostic will ask them to do a lot of counting, relationships between numbers, place value, basic addition and subtraction, sometimes one more, one less, shapes, measurement, and simple data interpretation. There are concrete representations, objects, visuals, different models that are presented to them. All problems are single-step problems, and there's an emphasis on understanding why numbers work the way that they do. In grades 3 through 5, now we're moving on to fluency and multi-step reasoning and application. So this is where students are first introduced in third grade, multiplication and division. So building upon, you can see if our basic addition and subtraction is not solid, where we might start to struggle in grades 3 through 5 when multiplication and division come in. Fractions and decimals are also introduced, so understanding the relationship between the two. Word problems are now multi-step, and you begin that early algebraic thinking and geometry and measurement relationships. There's increased abstraction. So we go from very concrete examples in K2 to now some abstract thinking in 3-5. Problems often require multiple strategies. There's less reliance on visuals and a greater emphasis on applying skills in a real world context. And then for our students in grades 6 through 8, the diagnostic focuses on abstract reasoning and mathematical modeling. You have ratios and proportional reasoning, expressions and equations, functions, statistics and probability, and geometry and spatial reasoning. Almost all problems are multi-step problems, and the key here is that there is no obvious entry point. So we're not telling a student to start at a certain place. They have to determine where to begin with the problem. There's a strong emphasis on reasoning, justification, and precision. So again, being able to say, this is the answer and this is why, or this is the process that I used and this is why I used that process to solve this problem. Concepts build heavily on your prior knowledge. And something that iReady points out is that errors often reflect gaps in foundational understanding at this level versus a lack of effort on the student's part. So when we interpret the iReady data, some things to consider, and I'm just going to display them all here. When you interpret it, keep in mind, as you saw from those previous slides, that as a grade level increases, the diagnostic becomes more rigorous. So even when students demonstrate growth, sometimes their proficiency does not change. Temporary plateaus and slower growth, it's common to see that amongst students because of the increased complexity of standards, greater demand for independent reasoning, and the reduction of scaffolds and supports as a student gets older. So again, the iReady is designed to identify instructional needs, not just performance levels. So when we get into it, when we dive into those weeds and we're looking for where those skills might be lagging or what domain a student might be struggling in, because they may be doing really well in one area, but there may be one specific domain that is preventing them from making the progress. So it's not just about saying I went from a 430 to a 445. It's what skills progressed and which ones did not. So growth should be viewed as developmentally, not just numerically. Again, thinking about what skills has that student moved through, not just how has their score itself changed. And so we pay attention to how complex their thinking has become over time. And tomorrow when we begin, we are going to look at cohort data, and we're going to go all the way back to 2022, and we'll be looking at the same moment in time throughout a school year. So when I presented to you a few weeks ago, it was on our trimester 1 data. We're going to take it all the way back to 2022 at the same time of school year, trimester 1, and show you cohort data. So current third graders going back to when they were kindergartners. Just some things I would like you to consider and keep in mind as we look at the cohort. is that proficiency indicates that a student has met expectations for one specific grade level at that moment in time. It does not necessarily mean that a student has mastered all future content that is to come. So for example, if I'm proficient in kindergarten, it does not guarantee that I will be proficient for the remainder of kindergarten or for the next grade level. It means that I'm meeting expectations for that moment in time. And because of this, it's important to consider as students move through, each grade introduces, as you saw, new skills with greater complexity, higher cognitive demand, and less scaffolding. Proficiencies grade specific, not permanent, as expectations rise every year. And just the last thing to consider is that learning doesn't grow in a straight line. It's not linear. Early skills sometimes take longer to solidify, and those advanced skills are slower and harder to develop, especially if our early foundational skills are not developed. All right, so that is what I have for you this evening. Tomorrow we'll dive in and we're going to actually look at numbers, and I know we're going to have some great conversation around those, but do you have any questions around the other data that I just presented to you, those first 6 slides?
You overestimated us with a great conversation.
Well, there's no sense starting when we're looking at data points tomorrow.
Yep.
Yep.
That's my point.
You get in the weeds tomorrow.
I agree. And I think it's really important information to kind of show the big changes going from K2 to 3.5 to 6.8, because yes, we all understand that like you learn harder stuff as you get older and you go into higher grade levels, but also understanding that like those additional cues, those additional visual supports get taken away. Also understanding that like what types of thinking are necessary and how those kind of build from one grade level to the next is a really wonderful tool for us. So thank you, Andrea.
Welcome. All
Thank you.
right. We'll see you all tomorrow evening. Thank
And
you.
that's all we have tonight, sir.
Okay, public commentary. Hopefully we have none. I think Yvonne's the only one here. Very good, thank you. In that case, we've completed our agenda. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have support?
Support.
Show of hands. Thank you. Monroe Public Schools Board of Education special work session for Monday, February 9th, 2026 is adjourned, and the time is 8:28.
All right, everybody, have a safe night. We'll see you tomorrow.